Eclipse Day. And if you would, please stand with me for the pledge. And our invocation will be by Councilmember Kennedy. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our prayer today is for the prevention of child abuse and neglect. God of endless love, ever caring, ever strong, always present and always just. You gave your only Son to save us by his blood on the cross. Gentle Jesus, shepherd of peace, join to your own suffering the pain of all who have been hurt in body, mind, and spirit by those who betrayed the trust placed in them. Hear the cries of our brothers and sisters who have been gravely harmed, and the cries of those who love them. Soothe their restless hearts with hope, steady their shaken spirits with faith, grant them justice for their cause, enlightened by your truth. Holy Spirit, comforter of hearts, heal your people's wounds, and transform brokenness into wholeness. Grant us the courage and the wisdom, humility and grace to act with justice. Breathe wisdom into our prayers and labors. Grant that all who are harmed by abuse may find peace in justice. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Tony, if you would, please call the roll.
Councilmember Shaw. Ulick.
Here.
Neese.
Here.
Owen.
Here.
Joy. Present. Kennedy.
Here.
Aspenlighter.
Here.
Tidswell.
Here.
Boyette. Here. Rupsis.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. Council, we have our minutes we'll get to at our next meeting for March 25th, but do we have any council courtesies this evening? Councilmember Owen and Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a note, many of you have probably seen this, but the city's neighborhood task forces have come together to sponsor an evening with Billings Public School Superintendent Dr. Garcia. That will be on Tuesday, April 23rd at 5:30 p.m. at the library. It will be an opportunity for the public to hear from the superintendent about the upcoming about the school safety mill levy, as well as to meet some of the school superintendent candidates. I have been asked to moderate that, so you can come and watch me handle the crowd. But again, it's Tuesday, April 23rd, 5:30 p.m. at the library.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a little personal note and a expression of deep gratitude. My mother is going through a health crisis, and I spent last night and this morning in St. Vincent's ER. And I just want to express my deep gratitude to the professionals that we have in our community who work in healthcare, Dr. Woods and Dr. Cunningham and all the techs. We should really, as a community, appreciate the dedicated and smart people that are in our healthcare system here in Billings. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Wish you and your mom the best. Councilmember Kennedy?
Mayor, I'd like to thank you and Commissioner Don Jones for speaking at the Pinwheel celebration on the courthouse lawn on Friday. And thank you, both the city and the county, for declaring April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. At the Family Tree Nurturing Center, I would like to invite all of you to Pinwheels for Prevention ceremony and reception on Thursday, April 11th at 6 p.m. down at the Family Tree Nurturing Center. And we'll be honoring Sue Peters, Frosty Urban, Paul and Donna Hagan, John and Megan Heenan, and Arby's of Billings. And I also left you have a ribbon that if you would wear during this month, Prevention Month, for the prevention of child abuse and neglect. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Kennedy. Any other council courtesies this evening? I do not see any, so we'll move on. We do have a proclamation this evening in recognition of Great American Cleanup Month, and the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Great American Cleanup, sponsored by the national nonprofit organization Keep America Beautiful, is the country's largest community improvement program and involves more than 20,000 communities and 500,000 volunteers and participants each spring. And whereas Bright and Beautiful is a proud affiliate of Keep America Beautiful and encourages people to take action to improve and beautify Billings and Yellowstone County so our community can be a clean, green, and beautiful place to live. And whereas the City of Billings seeks to protect its natural resources and bring people together to transform public spaces into beautiful spaces, and whereas the City of Billings recognizes its commitment to engage citizens, civic and government leaders, and business leaders to work together to reduce littering and beautify Billings and other nearby communities. And whereas Bright and Beautiful and the City of Billings are committed to elevating the importance of volunteerism and motivating everyone in our community to become stewards of the environment, particularly on Earth Day, Saturday, April 27, 2024, during Billings Great American Cleanup Day. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, do hereby proclaim the month of April to be Keep America Beautiful, Great American Cleanup Month, and call upon our citizens to join in activities that promote responsible environmental stewardship and help us renew our commitment to building a better world today and for future generations. That concludes our proclamations. Are there any council reports this evening? Councilmember Neese?
Mayor, were we going to have someone from Bright and Beautiful's?
Oh, I apologize.
we have
Thank
three
you.
ladies here.
Joni Cooley is here. It's good someone is paying attention. Thank you very much. Joni, would you like to add to the proclamation, please? Come forward.
Thank you, Mayor Cole and council members. It's so nice to see you all, and thank you for making this officially Great American Cleanup Month in the City of Billings. I'd like to introduce our former board chair and current treasurer, Barbara Turner, and Lisa Dietz, our current chair at Bright and Beautiful. And we are excited about the Great American Cleanup. There's been an awful lot of interest already. Teams signing up. We've got about 30 teams signed up already. And I did some math as I was preparing our press release. And if you know me, that's not something I ordinarily do. I just wanted to report to you from last year that we mobilized 1,300 local volunteers and cleared 11 tons of litter from Billings and Yellowstone County during Great American Cleanup season. So we want to top that this coming cleanup day, and hope all of you will be out there with us. Give us a call at Bright and Beautiful, and thanks for a moment.
Thank you very much. Now, are there any council reports this evening? Don't see any. Chris, City Administrator report.
Mayor and Council, briefly, just I guess a reference for the public, and I know you're aware of this consent agenda, item 1D, that's the Hoodies for Heroes, MOU. The change in the agenda late last week was just to update the memorandum of understanding per our conversation a week ago. There are also, the mayor's got a few tweaks he'd like to make today to it. I did get a chance to talk with Hoodies for Heroes today, and I expect those will go fine. So just a heads up there that I believe the mayor plans on pulling that off consent to add a few other components to it. And then lastly, there's no ex parte communication that's come in late this afternoon.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. We'll move on then to our next item on our agenda, and there's a copy of the agenda back on that cart for anybody who would like one. This is a time for public comment on things that are on our agenda tonight where there will not be a public hearing later. If there's a public hearing later, just wait until we get to the public hearing. But tonight, this is a time for public comment on anything under item 1, which is our consent agenda, and also items 4 and 5. Later, we'll have a public hearing on item 2, which is the Sioux Lane zone change, and also item number 3, which are all the changes to our ordinances involving nuisances, graffiti, and boarded up structures. So on those latter things, wait until we get to those public hearings. But if you'd like to comment on items 1, 4, or 5, please come forward. We just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and your address.
Councilman and Mayor, my name is Cheryl Davis. I live at 1231 Claim Jumper Lane. I was here a few weeks ago protesting the boulevard part of a sidewalk project on Claim Jumper, on the east side of Claim Jumper. And I got to read from this because my printer wouldn't work. To give you a little background, we were notified in December of the sidewalk proposal on the east side of Claim Jumper. We've received correspondence from the Public Works regarding this, and the only mention in those letters to date, in all the letters, was a 5-foot sidewalk. We learned later that this project included a 5-foot boulevard for a total of 10 feet. I've had discussions with the project coordinators and was advised of the city's right-of-way to be able to do that against our objections. To make it clear that all property owners, and I do have a signed petition of 100% of supporting the sidewalk, but not, they don't want the boulevard. We don't want the boulevard in there. We don't feel it's necessary. We're a neighborhood of 50-plus years old. I personally lived in my house for 35 years, and we have 20, 30, 40 years plus that live in the neighborhood, and nobody knows the neighborhood better than we do. Safety issues, the pedestrians, of course, we support the sidewalk. The boulevard, we don't feel is necessary. It's not a snow removal route, nor would a boulevard benefit any pedestrian if there was sidewalk construction or repair being done. I'm also considering, for my own safety, of bringing somebody 10 feet closer to my front door, to our cars, to our garage. These neighborhoods, again, were established a long time ago. And in new neighborhoods, you know, I understand if you want to support the boulevard sidewalk, well, you know what you're getting into. I feel it would also diminish the value of our property, as well as take away a lot of car spaces in our neighborhood. We're asking that you, or we're pleading for you to look at this and maybe get it on the agenda and put this project on hold until it's looked at more closely. I do have the petition with all homeowners' signatures that would be willing to talk to anybody that had any questions.
Okay, Cheryl, I apologize. Is this item on our agenda tonight? If so, what's the number? Okay, it is not. Normally, we would have you wait until the end of the meeting, but given the circumstances here, Council, I'm assuming there isn't any objection if anybody else wanted to comment on this item, then they wouldn't have to wait. So, okay, thank you very much. If you do have a petition, though, feel free to give it to City Administrator or
Okay.
anything else that you'd like to have distributed.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay.
You give me under your hammer.
What's that?
Under your hammer, the remote control.
Oh, thank you.
Bill,
Very good, thank you.
Bill, point of order. I just want to be fair to everyone. I feel like we're making an exception for one group that's not on our agenda, and I feel like there could be people sitting in the audience right now that also would like to talk to us about something not on the agenda,
It's
and they're
a
going to have to
perfectly
wait.
fair point. I understand.
Just wanted to raise it.
Adam, is that why, did you also want to comment on that same item?
Yes, it's the same item, yes.
Okay.
Given that we've already started, could we just go through, are there other non-agenda items? I mean, I don't want us to get totally bogged down, but I also understand.
Who's here tonight who would like to comment on something that is not on our agenda tonight? Go ahead and raise your hand if you would. Okay, so maybe on the circumstances, we're okay. So, all right, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, I live in the same neighborhood, and then I do protest this boulevard. I mean, it just takes away a lot of our parking and privacy, get people more closer walking to our house. We live there in peace for a very long time, and we see people walking by, and I think it's a good idea to have a sidewalk that where people can be more safe and, you know, they walk more in peace. But taking 10 feet away, I mean, it's just too much, I mean, of the parking lot that, and also coming closer to our homes. And safety and security and all of that. Yeah, it's also involved. So I do protest the boulevard part of this decision or the agenda that city has. So, and I do own two houses next to each other, and that even makes it, even harder on even paying for it. I mean.
Very good. Thank you very much. And just for the record, that's Adam Malik, M-A-L-L-A-K. Okay, thank you. Sir.
My name is Gregory Kenyon. I live at 1221 Claim Jumper Lane. I spoke to you several weeks ago about, again, the boulevard issue. What came up later in the meeting and was not able to address. I'd like the mayor and council, if you would, to please consider the difference between an engineering standard to be applied in all greenfield conditions versus common and typical practice when it's not a new project. It doesn't take much driving through the old Kimberly Heights subdivision, and you will find the vast majority of all the sidewalks do not have a boulevard. The recently installed upgrades to Aronson do not have a boulevard. Even when large corporate Walmart was brought into the Heights, Walmart was not forced to put in a boulevard. The sidewalks on Wicks are right next to the street. In fact, if you drive up Wicks, you'll find an occasional boulevard here and there. They're spotty. Most of them have been filled in with asphalt. And if I could take you there right now, you would see there's a section of a small boulevard slightly downhill from the Planned Parenthood before you get to Intermountain Healthcare. I don't know exactly who owns that empty field, but the boulevard in front of it, someone, I assume it's the city, has dug up the boulevard. They are currently sitting right in there where the boulevard would be. There are barricades so somebody doesn't have a big trip hazard. And there are plans apparently to fill in the boulevard and essentially bring the sidewalk closer to the street. So I'm asking, please don't impose on us a engineering standard when the common practice is not to include a boulevard. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment on items 1, 4, or 5? Okay, we'll close the public comment, this comment period then, and move on to our consent agenda. Council, are there any separations on item 1? Councilmember Owen.
Mayor, I'd like to separate A-N, excuse me, 1N, excuse me.
1.
That's the 1202 West Wicks Lane project.
Very good. 1N, zone change 1046. Councilmember Boyette and Councilmember Espenlater.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to separate item 1D, as we mentioned earlier by the city administrator.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Espenlater.
So I'm going to be part-time again this meeting. I'd like to separate items 1J, 1M, and on 1N, I'll also be recusing myself. So for these 3 items, I'll be recusing myself from the vote. But I'd like to separate items 1B and 1F, please.
1B, contract for new City Hall audio, and 1F, safe routes to school plan update. Thank you very much. Any other separations? Or any that you just want to keep on the consent agenda? That might have been. Councilmember Boyette.
Mayor, I move that we approve all of the other items of a consent agenda other than 1B, D, F, N, J, M, and N, as stated.
Very good. Is there a second? Councilmember Shaw, any discussion about any of the non-separated items or questions for staff or anything else before we proceed to a vote? Okay, so the motion is for approval of the non-separated items. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. First separated item then would be item 1B, contract New City Hall audio. Councilmember Aspenlater, that was your separation. Would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, and I guess I'll start with a comment and then I'll have a question for John. I sent an email out to Chris and Kevin, and then Chris sent it to John for addressing. On this, the thing that I guess caught my eye is that we're not using a local contractor on AV equipment, which inherently never works right. And support is a key and critical issue of this type of equipment. And, we've got a local contractor in Billings that was a part of this process, that submitted the bid the first time when the bid was rejected, and then submitted the second time. It wasn't selected the second time around. So I'm concerned that we're using a non-local contractor on this, and we're not going to have the support moving forward when we install this, because when you install that equipment and then you call the local guy to come fix it, that's not great either. So, John, I guess my question is, why, under the first bid process, did we not just negotiate with the local contractor into the budget that we had for the work that needed to be done in City Hall?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, so the initial sealed bids that came back, we only had one firm that responded. So us, being Kevin, Jessica, and I thought that it would be best if we re-advertised to get more interest in the project. We thought the price came in a little high. It was over our budget by $700,000. So that was the determining factor to re-advertise. And to answer the larger question is, the firm that we did select through the RFP process does have a local office. They do have a presence here. They have technicians and office staff. So one of the questions we asked through the interview process was, if we need support, how are you going to support us? And they said, we have an office here. Our corporate office is out of Reno. So that's probably why that's on the certificate of insurance and subsequently on the contract. But we feel very confident that the firm that is installing will be able to provide us the level of support that we need going forward.
Okay. All right, any other questions for John or on this item? Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I move we approve contract for new City Hall audiovisual equipment with Teledata Technologies.
Thank you very much. Second, Councilmember Boyette. Any discussion on the motion? Motion is for approval. Item 1B. Seeing none, if in favor of the motion for approval, item 1B, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Nay. Voting in opposition, Councilmembers Espenlater and Kennedy. Anyone else? Motion passes then 9 in favor, 2 in opposition. Next separated item was item 1D, memorandum of understanding with Hoodies for Heroes. Councilmember Boyette, that was your separation. I had had some discussion with you about a possible change, but I'm going to turn it to you to kick off if you had anything else.
Yes, sir. Yeah, there was just a question about the term of the MOU, and I think the, excuse me, the document you provided all the council members describes what we should do. It's very self-explanatory, and I just wanted to make sure this was included in the MOU.
Okay, and Council, you have in front of you, I handed out before and also emailed this afternoon, but for any members of the public and also for representatives from Heroes or Hoodies for Heroes, what I was proposing was to change paragraph 4. It's actually 4 in the new agreement. I have 3, but it's 4 because that's from the old agreement. To add a sentence in the paragraph that deals with how long the agreement would last, to say Hoodies for Heroes shall provide funds to the city of Billings within 3 years of the effective date of this MOU, sufficient in the city of Billings' discretion for the city of Billings to complete construction of the memorial described in this agreement, failing which the city of Billings may elect without further obligation to Heroes or Hoodies for Heroes. And my reason for proposing that change to the draft MOU was I was just concerned we might have a situation where there's a delay in raising these funds or completing the project, and we've tied up this land, and it may go on for years. So having some sort of an endpoint where if it doesn't happen, we can, the city can elect to terminate the agreement seems wise. So that's the purpose for that. We don't have a motion on the floor. There's other issues that this might raise, so we'll want to hear from Heroes from Hoodies or Hoodies for Heroes, sorry, I keep reversing that, on that issue, but there may be other issues as well. Councilmember Aspenlider and Councilmember Neese.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I talked with Ken, and I don't think that your language is acceptable as it's proposed. I think the timeline is perfectly acceptable of 3 years, but there is no intent for Hoodies for Heroes to give the money to the city for the city to then administer the construction of the project. In my experience, that never lowers the cost of construction. It only adds administrative costs, bonding costs, all of the things to make this more expensive than it needs to be, and it's not a project that the city needs to do. What we're being asked here is to allow them to build a monument on city property. They'll maintain it. They'll build it and make sure it's built to our standards, but this is not a project that the city of Billings needs to build, and it's not the intent of Hoodies for Heroes to do it this way. So we need to modify that language, in my opinion, and I don't think it's a good start for us.
Okay, thanks. On that point, I'm wondering if we could get Mike Pigg to comment, because the agreement was not perfectly clear on that issue. So, Councilmember Neese?
Yeah, I'd like to be recognized.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mayor, just to get the motion on the table, I'm going to make a motion to approve item 1D, memorandum understanding with Heroes for Hoodies.
As currently drafted.
As currently drafted, and then we can make amendments to it later if we want, but let's get it on the table.
Great. Councilmember Owen indicates a second.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mike, you've heard some of the discussion. Would you like to comment on any of those issues?
Right. So the intent, the original intent of it, and I guess I missed on that, was to have Hoodies for Heroes donate the structure, not the money to the city to have us build it. It was just to donate that structure. And I didn't draw a timeline in there because I didn't want to tie their hands and say, if you don't raise the money in 5 years, you can't build it. It's not like that's a piece of property that we're looking to build on anytime soon. It's a small little chunk of a park. I guess I should have thought not indefinite, but I don't know how long. In a 3-year timeline, if they're okay with that, I guess that would be an okay timeline with us too.
Mike, can you comment on I guess you did, already did. What Councilor Aspenlider said is consistent with your understanding as well. The plan is to turn over the land and let them build, not for the city build, because that would be inconsistent with what we've always done in the parks, for example, with the Yellowstone Kelly interpretive site.
Right. So it's actually a new policy that we've kind of been implementing. And so that's how we have done a number of projects here lately. Allow the, if there's no city dollars involved in it, we allow the organization to take on and do the construction project all the way through. And so that was the original intent with this, yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. It just wasn't real clear to me in the agreement. I knew that would be contrary to past policy. So thank you for that clarification. Then I would agree with Councilmember Aspenlider. Even if we put some sort of a time limit, we would need to change that language to just reference perhaps completion of the memorial, not handing over the money. Councilmember Aspenlider?
So if we're good with Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Shaw, I'd make a motion to amend that language in.
Okay, so absolutely. So it's go ahead.
So I'll move to amend the original motion to include a 3-year window for fundraising and commitment with a construction schedule on the backside of that. So the amendment would say they have 3 years to raise the money with an appropriate construction schedule at that point.
Okay, motion made, seconded to amend the original motion to just apply that 3 year to fundraising, but not to necessarily construction or completion of this construction. That would be some reasonable amount of time after that. Yes. Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification. Any discussion on the proposed amendment, since that's the first thing that we would vote on? I think. No further discussion, questions? Okay, Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I was wondering if Mayor, you would consider asking if that can be a friendly amendment so that we only need to have one vote for this?
You know, we can, technically, I looked this up the other day, it really, once the motion's been made, technically, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment. It's very handy to have this concept, so let's stick with the idea of, we'll go ahead and go through the formality of voting on it, we can talk about that another day, but any other discussion on the merits of the proposed amendment? Councilmember Kennedy.
I just would say that none of the projects that I worked on with the county, that we worked with the veterans, they all did the same. They raised the money, they built it, and then the county took it over. I think the 3 years, I think it'll be done a lot sooner than that, but I've never seen anything drag out, especially working with the veterans and the community support. So I don't think there's really a lot to worry about on this. I've been helping them out, and I would like to see this go forward.
Very good, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Again, this is just a vote on the amendment that has that 3-year time limit as described. If in favor of the proposed amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, nay. That passes unanimously. We now have the amended underlying motion. Any further discussion on that? That's the merits to adopt the whole agreement. Chris, you want to add something?
Sorry, just looking for clarification. So is the 3 years is to complete the project? Is that
I was
correct?
hearing no. I was hearing it was to finish fundraising with some additional time after that to be granted for a reasonable amount of time for construction.
Okay.
But not a defined amount of time, a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
Gina wanted to ask a question.
No, please, go ahead.
I did. I just wanted to make sure that we get the amendment correct, if it's voted up, just to get the amendment correctly. Would the language be that the Hoodies for Heroes begin construction by that 3 years, or simply complete the fundraising and provide that information to the city?
I understand it was only complete, but this was where the motion came from. Councilor Rasmussen.
So to make this easy for everybody and to put a hard legal, let's say construction needs to start within 3 years. So breaking ground has to start within 3 years.
Yeah, we'll let them comment, but Councilmember Aspenleiter, the only thing I would comment on, we've already approved something different, so we'd have to go back, which we can do. Just in case we get some additional clarity or questions from our Heroes for Hoodies, could we ask you guys to comment? You've heard the discussion. We're coming to the end of this discussion, I think, but we don't want to proceed if it's something we've got any concerns coming from you. Go ahead.
Mayor and Council, Ken Callahan and Rick Baker. Timeline. We believe it's going to be raised this year. I've talked to 4 people today. You can put December of 26 on there. We're fine with that. Or if you want to put 3 years, don't drag it out and think it's going to take 3 years and then construction starts. At the end of the day, if you watch my PowerPoint, it said we're going to build it. Give us the capability of doing it. We'll build it. We sign it over. 3 years is enough time for all of that. That's completion, turn it over. We don't need any longer than 2, but if you want to give us 3, that's great.
Okay, thank you very much. There's some clarity there. Councilor Aspenleiter, in light of that, would you want to proceed as we already have, or would you like to go back and amend the current motion to say construction within 3 years?
I think we're good.
Okay, we're good with just money raised within 3 years. Okay, very good. All right, well, that's the motion that you have in front of you then. Any further questions or discussion? The only thing I would add is I did get a call from a Korea veteran today who spoke eloquently of the service of Korean War veterans. I explained to him this does not go there. This is only dealing with recognition of those who killed in action after the Vietnam War, and he understood that. But we did not want to forget about the sacrifice from many other veterans in previous conflicts and wars, including the Korean War. So. With that, we'll proceed to a vote. Okay, so if the motion is clear, if in favor of the now amended motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Okay, motion passes. That concludes item 1D and brings us to item 1F, Safe Routes to School Plan Update. Councilor Rapslider, that was your separation.
Yeah, and I kind of alluded to this in the work session. Next Friday, we're kicking off the overall transportation plan and scoping that project. My concern is that we adopt a safe routes to school plan and a bike ped plan, and we get those plans adopted before we actually have our transportation master plan in place. So what I'm asking is to table this plan until we get into the transportation master plan so that we can make sure that the three plans that deal with transportation all jive. I would hate to adopt a plan that within 6 months already has conflict with the transportation master plan and have to be amended or modified. I think all of the information that's presented is good. I think it's all useful and it will be used. I talked with Director Mailing. Public Works is well aware of the things that are here and will capture those projects as they put forward their capital improvements plan for the city. So I don't think we're missing anything by not adopting it immediately tonight. I think it's prudent for us to push pause now until we get the transportation master plan moving forward, and we can make sure that when we put forward these policies, there are no conflicts and they all move together cohesively.
Okay, there was not a motion in there, but we're just kind of having a discussion here for a little while. So Councilmember Shaw's hand, Councilmember Boyette, and Rupsis.
I'm going to make a motion. I'd like to also speak to it if there's a second. So I'd like to move to approve item 1F, the Safe Routes to School Plan Update Phase 2.
Okay, motion made for adoption of the plan. Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Rupsis, I believe, is the second. So you do have a motion. Did you want to speak to your motion?
I do, yeah.
As well, go ahead.
I completely understand what Councilmember Aspenleiter is saying. It does make sense. The way I look at this plan is that I want this to be a building block of the ultimate transportation plan, and so I want it to be adopted now so that it cannot be changed at that level, because I don't want that to be based around how this fits into it. I want it to be designed around this plan, because to me, this is incredibly important for our schools and our safety. So I totally hear what you're saying. I look at it kind of in the opposite way of, I want this piece in place before we embark on the bigger picture piece.
Okay, Councilmember Rupsis, did you want to?
Just briefly, Mayor, yes. In fact, Councilmember Aspenleiter, last year, I objected to the Community Transportation Safety Plan for almost this exact reason, is that that plan, these plans that talk about safety need to be inputs and central features of the larger transportation planning process. So it's not necessarily cart before the horse. This is the cart. This is, I mean, if we're talking about public safety, this is an item that needs to be in that conversation, and we should derive our overall master plan around the concepts of safety first. So I will definitely support this motion here.
I hate to take objection to your analogy, but shouldn't this be the horse? Should be the horse, I think, yeah. So, Councilmember Aspenleiter and Councilmember Gulick, Councilmember Neese, did you ever? Okay, so I'm sorry, Councilmember Boyette, I had recognized.
Thank you, Bill. How about the staff? Anybody here what happens if we did move this a week or 2 weeks or a month? Does it really make any difference, or does it make a difference according to what we've heard so far?
Thank you, Karen, Council and Mayor. I'm talking like the mayor. I appreciate it for staff to bring you some information. A week or two doesn't affect us. The concern in the long range is that we were given direction under our UPWP to complete these transportation planning activities, which include not only the Safe Routes to School plan, it includes our West End neighborhood plan update, our Heights neighborhood plan update, our PED bike plan, and the current plan that we're trying to get underway, which is the 21st Street underpass. That is a concern, because if we start to delay, then we're affecting the MPO and our federal funding and moving forward. Not only that, but we're having our consultants sit and wait to move forward in our transportation planning process. The one thing with transportation planning is one of the C's is continuous. We're always planning. The analogy I use is the legislature. We know every 2 years the legislature is going to propose things that we're going to have to address through our regulations. Community goals change, things change. But if we always stop to wait to what will happen in the future, we don't get our planning documents in place where we need them now. We fully intend that with whatever this transportation study looks like, that it will impact our future plans. but they're plans, they're not design documents. Whatever comes out of those plans to be designed really will be at the standard of what we have in place at that time. It's not based on something that was 5 years ago. We also did just update our long-range transportation plan last year, which is a more large umbrella. And then from that, we do these local planning studies to address those needs in our transportation plan. So I just see that some sort of delay like this could really impact our ability to continuous planning. Like, as I stated, things change, and we're fully on board with this transportation study. But I think to pause right now at the end of this study right now could really damage our moving forward with our other projects, because if we start to delay those, it's already going to be very impactful on our staff and for our community to move forward with those plans that we were directed to do. So.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to Councilmember Aspenlighter, but Councilmember Gulick and Dees, you hadn't spoken. Okay, and then Councilmember Rowan and Aspenlighter. Councilmember Gulick?
I think one other point that was made last week was that, we can't go after certain funding if we don't have an adopted plans for these things, and so it does impact that as well. There are plenty of plans where we haven't necessarily implemented everything that's to the T that's in those plans. Staff have discretion as other things are, co-developments are occurring as well. So I think, adopt this plan and yeah, maybe there are certain things we don't implement right immediately because there are other developments occurring, but I think it's important to adopt the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rowan. Councilmember Aspenlighter?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I have more of a process question than anything, and I don't know if the city administrator wants to answer it or Mayor, if you do, but at some point in these sort of large umbrella plans, there has to be an opportunity for council to have input. And it seems to me that there's a pretty chronic pattern of a plan being brought forward and council members saying, gosh, there's some policy things here we'd like to wrestle with, and being told, oh, it's not this plan, it's that plan. And then that plan comes and it's, oh, it's not this plan, you should have done it before. We sort of end up getting a little bit of a runaround, and plans tend to come to us when we're up against a deadline and they can't be delayed because we would harm things. So I think multiple council members have said we have concerns about transportation planning and how we can be involved in transportation planning. And I just want to know when. If it's not tonight, then when? Because the long-range transportation plan is already underway. Multiple council members on land use issues have said we have concerns, and we've been told, oh, it's when the subdivision regs come that you need to weigh in. But the subdivision regs are already out in the community getting comment. So just help me understand, when do we get to have input?
Mayor, Councilmember Purinton. So,
no.
Sorry, I was thinking Councilmember Purinton because she was on the committee that helped create this plan. So, sorry, my apologies, Councilmember Owen. So, when does the council get to participate? They've been participating throughout the development of this plan, fully. So, one of your peers was on that board participating, representing you. Does that mean that voice was the only voice that matters? Absolutely not. Let me be clear what I also heard too. It is not detrimental to not adopt this plan tonight. If you want weeks, or I might even stretch that to 6-8 weeks. But if we're waiting for the new transportation community discussion, at least my conversations with Director Melling in my past, that's a 12 to 18 month process, not a 60, 90 day process. So, to your question, when do you get to, absolutely, you get to, feedback from this body has been made throughout the development of this document. In fact, I think this body can be credited with this second safe routes to school, because the first safe routes to school only focused on elementary schools. And this body said, we think you should focus, also add junior highs and high schools. So that process is where we went. It's ready for your recommendation moving it forward. If you want to more changes to it or you want time, that input is welcomed. I think that's different though than postpone this until 18 months from now when we're finished with this other discussion we're having.
Maybe I should ask the question a little differently, Mayor, if I could. What Councilmember Aspenlight was talking about is the intersect between plans, and those intersects inherently raise just sort of general policy conversations. So if the staff concern is not delay, and I'm for that, and you're right to characterize how we've influenced where we are today, I agree with all of that. Can we schedule some work sessions, maybe after the budget, where we talk about large-scale transportation goals that influence the community transportation plan? I mean, can we have some of these conversations where individual council members are not a replacement for everybody? No one of us can speak for all of us, but can we have an opportunity to wrestle with some of these transportation land use issues that I think almost every council member has raised some sort of concern with?
Clearly, the answer is yes, but I think it's important to understand what public process we've been going through, because it hasn't just been one of your peers on it. There has been a public process to get us to this point, and that's important for the public's input.
Laura, do you want to weigh in on any of this?
I would like to a little bit. Thank you, Councilmember Owen, Mayor, Council. The process for transportation planning, you probably noticed in your inbox, you get weekly updates on our current transportation planning processes. Every time we initiate a transportation planning process, we ask for members of the council to participate in that. And the role of your position in that transportation planning is to bring those issues to the council and disseminate and talk about them and let us know. In the case of our long-range transportation plan, we had a specific meeting just with City Council to talk about the transportation plan and the policy and the issues surrounding the community. We did that. So there's always constant opportunities for public participation, and we welcome your participation. We want that. And we understand that you're very busy, and we understand that it's hard to make every meeting, but that's why you do see those weekly email updates about all our projects, just so you are aware of what we're doing when we have those public outreach opportunities, and to keep you involved as the best as we can. So again, I'm not so concerned about a week or two, a few weeks delay. I'm concerned that this could have a cascade effect on our other planning efforts. We're right in the middle of our UPWP. It's just going to be a matter of probably weeks here before I come to you and say, okay, we're receiving our new allocation of transportation planning dollars. What is this community's goal for planning staff this next year to implement that meets the community goals? So that is really when we have that opportunity to have those big discussions to find out the information. Again, we're not designing projects. We're just identifying projects that this community would like to move forward with. When it comes to design, that's totally Debbie's realm, and we don't step on those toes. We just provide, the planning documents to move them forward.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Aspenlier.
So I'll be voting in opposition to this, and for a lot of reasons, but I want to clarify a couple things that I think are a little bit misleading. We are not losing out on funding by not adopting this plan. We have an adopted Safe Routes to School plan with a number of priorities and a draft that's 95% of the way there that is ready for adoption to supplement the phase one version. So to say that we're going to miss out on funding opportunities is misleading, in my opinion. We are not. I don't think this adds any extra effort to the planning staff because we're not proposing to change anything right now. What I'm proposing is not to redo the effort. I'm just saying, let's pause to make sure that we don't have any core conflicts with some of the recommendations that are there. I think if you look deeply at that document, there are section representations of road improvements, including predicted bicycle ways and things like that, identified on corridors that they may not be appropriate for based on our overall transportation master plan. And those are the types of conflicts that I think it's healthy for us to eliminate and get out of the way. And when we put these documents forward as clean documents for everybody to look at, in my mind, there is no harm in delaying to make sure that when we put forward a master transportation plan, that all of the supporting documents that help develop it drive and communicate with each other. I disagree, I guess, with Councilman Rupsis about this needing to drive the transportation plan. That's my fear, is that we're going to adopt two documents, and then those two documents are going to be the thing that drives how we address transportation in our community. And then the driver is going to be bike and pedestrian and not transportation as a whole. And that is my fear at the core, is that we're going to adopt plans, and then as we're having this conversation, the discussion is going to be, well, it has to be this way because we already adopted this plan. And that does not help us have free conversation about what is actually the best for our community. It's adopting a plan and then using that to say, well, this is the way it's got to be because we already adopted this one. That's not the right way to look at this holistically in my mind, and that's why I'm opposed and supporting tabling this.
Okay. Councilmember Joy, I don't think you've commented. Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the comments that are being made here at Council about the importance of Council input. I think it's probably a little bit of a, I guess, we have to recognize the limits of our own power in the sense that we have addressed bike pedestrian issues to previous councils, and council gave that input. The input was, we don't want bike lanes on Lewis Avenue because it slows down traffic. It doesn't feel safe. Therefore, we moved what we were doing and we changed our planning based on council input, based on public input. So I guess it's kind of a limitation that we need to recognize as council members. We only set for a certain number of terms, and as the terms of our previous council members have already inputted and changed and shaped what we're doing right now. So I don't think that any member of council, no matter how long they sit, how many terms they sit, have that power to make that plan that makes the overarching plan that then is not fed in from a previous plan and previous input. So I think it's really a matter of kind of the limitations of what we're able to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Boyette. Councilor Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe just a question for Councilmember Absent-Leiter. You're saying to delay it a week, a month, 18 months? I mean, that was, how long would you suggest we delay it if you wanted to?
And this would be then a question for Director Mailing about how long she sees this transportation master plan process taking. To me, I don't see this as an 18-month process. Boy, I would be severely disappointed if it took us that long to get through that process.
I was thinking 3 years, but no, I think the way I'm envisioning, we have a meeting next Friday with several of you and staff to talk about kind of what this transportation study is going to look like and how we're going to move forward through it. So I anticipate there's going to be several decision points along the way. You know, we talked at our retreat, the first thing is, what are our goals? We need to decide that as a body, as a staff, as a community before we move on. So I think the first couple of steps of deciding what we're going to do are going to help us at that point say, okay, now are we ready to adopt this plan? So I think there's going to be points along the way where there's potential to do this, to finalize something. I don't see the other plan having to be completely done. Could it take 12 to 18 months? Yes. This plan, every other plan should go kind of at some point within there. So not 18 months. That, you don't look like that answered. I'm just saying they're going to be at the same time. And I don't think they have to wait till the end of the project to start, you know, finishing all these other ones. Yeah, sorry, that got a little convoluted.
Okay. Councilmember Neese, and I'm just going to comment, jump in here a little bit. One thing to keep in mind is the role of the PCC and the county on this. They've already approved the plan, or in the process of approving the plan. So I guess their approval would just stay in abeyance if we were to come back to it. But if you can imagine a scenario where if 12 to 18 months went by and the county had approved it, they might say, well, we approved it 12 to 18 months ago. I'm not sure our approval can be assumed later, and we might have to go back through that approval process. Well, anyway, that's just.
Point of clarity, Mr. Mayor, the city or the county commission has this up for adoption tomorrow. It has not approved it.
Oh, okay. So the planning board has approved it. They would have to decide whether that continued, and then the county commissioners would do whatever they did. Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Kennedy?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to say I was there when we looked at the first Safe Routes to School plan, and this is where I fell short, and I was encouraged to see this plan. I've read through the plan, and there's a lot of good things that I see in this plan, and I want to support the plan. But I think I get what you're talking about as far as making sure that this is not driving the plan, because it was your team about cart and horse. It's actually a team of horses in a cart, and who's going to be the lead horse, who's going to be, in the middle of the pack. We need a lot of different horses to pull this cart. And so I don't know if this needs to be the lead horse, but I think it's very, very important. And so I am concerned about the time delay. It wasn't clear if it's not going to be 18 months, but we don't know if it's going to be, 17 months, right? So that's a really long time. And so I am concerned about that. I do think that we as a council have the ability to alter from the plans. It is not an ordinance. It's not a resolution. It's not, it's not stone is paper, and we as a council can do that. And so if during the transportation plan there's a conflict, then I think we can just say, well, listen, we're deviating from the Safe Routes to School plan because of X, Y, Z. I would be supportive of maybe delaying this a couple of months, as I think you said, would not impact a lot of different things. If we understood, or if I understood, or you knew that there were certain things in this plan that you could bring back to us and say, hey, we need to say, this needs to be delayed, or this needs to be. And so I would support, if you made a motion, I'm not going to make the motion, but if you would have made a motion, delay for a short period of time to bring it back, with knowing that you're going to bring back specific changes or recommendations to delay or not, maybe approve, but not approve certain things, and I would support that. But as it is now, seeing that I really think we need to move on safe routes to schools, and that I am going to support the plan if there's not a motion with some better delay options.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Councilor Kennedy, with your permission, Laura has come to the podium. I think she probably wanted to comment on that, maybe on the issue of whether there are specific changes needed. But Laura, do you want to comment before I give it to Councilmember Kennedy?
Mayor, Council, thank you. We did anticipate, and we wanted to discuss about what we could do internally to maybe provide some guidance or provide some language that would maybe help alleviate this concern about recommending approval of this document to Policy Coordinating Committee. Elise did draft. You'll notice in the plan there's already some disclaimers about how this is not requiring you to fund this plan. This is a planning level document. She did develop some disclaimer language that can be included that I think could maybe help. If you wish to delay temporarily, that is fine. We're in support of what this council wants. You're one part of the reviewing committee that looks at this through the MPO. I have concerns over long-term delay. I think this has cascading effects on other projects that we're right in the middle of. And but I'll turn it over to Elise just to maybe talk a little bit about that and see if we can help maybe alleviate some concerns about this planning document versus our other documents.
Okay, Elise?
Yes, let's see. Push through. Thank you. Okay, so we kind of thought, instead of we have the plan now, we were thinking, what could we look at to add to the plan to assuage some of your concerns? So if Chris could click through. Technical difficulties, stand by. Okay. So first, we just wanted to remind you this is funded through our Metropolitan Planning Organization that's required in areas of 50,000 people or more, and those funds pay for staff as well as these planning efforts, and we do have our long-range transportation plan Chris, I'll let you click through. This is, and I apologize, I don't know how to move that.
Click on it and drag it. Yeah, it's not on this screen.
Oh, it's on here. Or maybe, I think Tony's.
Is Tony able to see it, possibly move or Wyatt and Tony?
I minimized it and nothing happened.
Does it let you pick up and move it? Because it doesn't show it on the screen at all.
Ah.
Good job.
Well, this is.
Well, now we're not.
I didn't do it.
Okay, but Wyeth
seems
is
to have
still
worked.
online, is that right? Okay,
That
so,
seems to have worked.
Yeah, it's down here.
Okay.
okay.
So we do have our long-range transportation plan that was last adopted in 2023. And that is a high-level look at the transportation system, and it's a framework to guide the continued development and implementation of multimodal transportation system projects for Billings. Could go to the next one. Okay, and so just to give you a little bit more information about the LRTP, it does build in data and recommendations from sub-area plans and also plans completed under a specific framework in the past 5 years. So that includes like our Safe Routes to School plan, our pedestrian bicycle master plan, and our Lockwood non-motorized plan. So this is kind of the precedent we have for wrapping previous plans into a new plan. Just wanted to remind you of the history of the Safe Routes to School Phase 2 plan. Council requested that we complete it in 2021. The council approved the funding allocation under the UPWP, the Unified Planning Work Program, in 2022. The council approved the contract for the plan in 2022. And then in April of last year, Sanderson Stewart gave an update to the council on the plan. So I mentioned last time we have a lot of disclaimers in this plan. So this disclaimer is listed with every single school profile. So every single page where a school has a recommendation listed, this is on there. The most pertinent part is projects listed here have not been designed. Final design and implementation may be subject to further data collection, including but not limited to a speed study, a traffic or pedestrian count, a warrant study, right-of-way acquisition, or public input process. And this process may make a project infeasible. The availability of funding for both initial construction and ongoing maintenance contributes to project feasibility. So I think that disclaimer does give quite a bit of leeway there. If you could advance to the next one. We also have a disclaimer on the first page of the document that says this is a planning level document only. It is not intended to obligate or mandate development of projects in the plan or obligate any jurisdiction to implement any or the entire document. In addition, this document does not assume prioritization or commitment of any local funds unless authorized by a local government agency. If you could go to the next slide. This is the last slide. So what I would propose, if you're uncomfortable with how this plan would line up with the next one, would be adding the final paragraph there that says this document outlines project recommendations as of the adoption date. However, the City of Billings is considering a system-wide plan, which when completed may contradict some of the recommendations in the Safe Routes to School Plan Phase 2. If the new system-wide plan contradicts this plan, the new plan will take precedence. If this is the case, the Safe Routes to School Plan Phase 2 may be edited to eliminate contradictions between the two plans. So just wanted to provide that as an option that, you know, we do know that things change, and this really gives you a really solid way to say, hey, if something comes up in this next transportation master plan, we have this language in the document that says we will change and that other plan takes precedent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elise. We'll go back to Councilmember Kennedy, and that's where we left off. Council, I think we need to draw some sort of conclusion and move on to a vote here. Just a reminder where we're at procedurally. We do have a vote. We have a motion on the floor to approve the plan as drafted, which would not include the language in the red. So, Councilmember Kennedy.
What I would say is, after listening to all of this, it's really, this plan is contingent upon the transportation plan being adopted, and it'll be changed. I don't see, and seeing what you put together in the last few minutes and everything, I don't see a real problem with pausing this, giving us all enough time to take a look at all of this and bringing it back in 2 months. So I would make a motion that we pause this process for 2 months to come back to this body with the updated schools to safe routes to school plan, and with the contingencies that you just wrote up here. I would make that as a motion.
Okay, Councilor Asselleiter, you're indicating a second. Yeah, I guess that would be a substitute motion because that would remove the original one. Okay. Now discussion on that proposal. Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Boyette.
I'm not going to support the substitute motion because I don't see the benefit in a delay. I think this is easy enough to add. I was going to suggest let's add that paragraph as a friendly amendment, even though apparently those don't exist. But with Councilmember Roupsis's support, saying we could just include that into the original amendment. I know we now have a substitute motion on the floor, but just to let everyone know, I'll vote no on that, but I would be happy to amend the original motion to include this language from staff.
If this fails, we'll come back to that issue. Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going along with this to move it along for a couple of months, but the red line document tells us this is a plan. It's not etched in stone. If we don't like the plan, guess what? We change it. So I like the idea of moving along with the red one as well, so I probably won't support this substitute
Okay,
motion.
Councilmember Troy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I won't be supporting the substitute motion. A 2-month delay probably wouldn't have an impact that a really long delay really would, because as you know, School District 2 has a $4 million budget deficit in the elementary area. And to address those deficits, there have been plans, and there is now a elementary school that will be closed. And redistricting will have to happen, because redistricting is how we're going to spread those students around to account for those schools overcrowded and those where there are available, there's available space. So if we delay a plan because of what might change, I promise you, something will change. So if we put the red words into the next motion, then I think we'll get it right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion before we vote on the substitute motion, proposed substitute motion? Okay, we'll move ahead. Is the motion sufficiently clear? I will ask first for those in favor of Councilmember Kennedy's substitute motion to say aye.
Aye.
Voting in favor, Councilmember Aspenlighter, Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Tidswell, Councilmember Owen, and Councilmember Neese. So that would be 5. If voting in opposition, please say nay. Nay. Voting in opposition, Councilmembers Shaw, Gulick, Joy, Roupsis, Boyette, and Cole. So the motion fails narrowly. And brings us back to now the underlying motion. Councilmember Shaw, I'm going to just recognize you to do what you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
And then Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. So on the process, do I need a formal amendment, or can we just accept this as a friendly?
Let's do the formal.
Okay. Then I would make a formal amendment to add this language into the plan that as recommended by staff.
Okay, motion. Is there a second? Second, Councilmember Neese.
Yes,
Okay,
I will second
did
it.
either of you want to speak to your motion?
I did want to ask a procedural question.
Go Go ahead.
to Gina. Can the movement amend their own motion?
Councilmember Neese, that's a really good question that I don't think that I have ever considered before. So if you can give me a moment, I will look that up. I don't see why not. Well, I actually think that the movement could withdraw their motion and then make a new motion
Right.
with
I
the
understand
consent
that.
of the
They could do
second,
that.
but amending their own motion, I guess I don't have the answers to that
Okay, let's say
right
I
now.
did that then.
Yeah.
I withdraw the motion and made a new one.
Okay, as long-
Is there a second?
Okay, I'm not sure actually you have the power to withdraw the motion. I mean, once it's on the table, it belongs to the group. So I really don't think that's the case. Councilor East, let's be realistic here. Does it matter in this case? It's an interesting question. We'll go back and look at it. I guess what we could always do is ask you made the second, whether you would like to make the motion, and then somebody else will second it if she were to withdraw her motion.
Well, I'm okay with it. I was just asking a procedural question to make sure it couldn't get challenged later on. Because I am supporting this. I do think that it needs to go. And I would have supported the delay, but I think going forward with this is fine. But I just want to make sure procedurally wise, we're not getting someone to challenge it later.
Okay, we'll, I just hate to delay our meeting unless Gina has a handy dandy place where she can check that. I'm not personally aware of a concern, but it's not something that comes up enough that I could say confidently one way or another, so just don't know.
I'm okay with you deciding whether we.
Okay, well, then I decided it's okay. I don't see.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move the question.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Did I hear somebody call the question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we have to vote on whether to vote, and I think we need 2/3 on that. So if you're ready to vote, the motion has been called, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Excuse me.
Did you just call the question on the amendment to the motion? Yes.
Yes, on the motion to add the disclaimer language. That's only what we're voting on at this point. Yes, thank you for that clarification. So, okay, if opposed to the motion, call the question, please say nay. Nay. Okay, you can't vote in opposition to your own motion, I believe.
You cannot do that.
Oh, okay, that's true. Okay, so
I'm a yes.
you support your motion?
Yes.
Okay, all right, then I think we have the 2/3, so we will vote. Okay, so the motion now is just to add the disclaimer language to the transportation agreement. Clear? Okay, if in favor of the proposed amendment by Councilmember Shaw, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Okay, voting in opposition, Councilmembers Aspenleiter and Rupsis? And Councilmember Tidswell? Okay, the motion was Councilmember Shaw's motion to amend the underlying motion to add to the Safe Routes to School plan staff's recommended disclaimer language in the red that says this is just a plan that can be changed. So that was the proposed motion. Are we ready to vote on the motion? Yes. Any other discussion I guess we haven't voted on the amendment, right? So you guys are confusing me. So did we vote on the?
Yes,
we did. Okay, and that passed. So now we have an underlying amended motion. Are we ready to vote on that? I hope so. Okay. So if the motion is clear, it's the transportation plan plus the red disclaimer language. If in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Voting in opposition, Councilmember Aspenleiter, all other council members voting in favor, so the amended motion, or I'm sorry, the amended plan is approved. Yes, well, she can listen. She has the advantage of the recording. All right, well, thank you very much. That concludes item 1F. Next item up was item 1J. This is the word for, this is Councilmember Aspenleiter will be abstaining and recusing himself. Expanding Ward 5, is there a motion on Councilmember item 1J? Councilmember Neese?
Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 1J, M, and N, which are all items, I'm sorry, 1J and M, which is were recusal only by Councilmember Aspenleiter, so that we could just move them both ahead. Well, and, yes, and, yes.
Okay,
But N is.
No, N is separate, so
N is
N is separately, so just J and M to get them out of the way.
okay, just J and M. I don't know any reason we can't combine those, so Councilmember Kennedy makes the second. The motion is for approval of item 1J and item 1M. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, so if in favor of the approval of item 1J and 1M, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Then item 1N is our final item. That's the second reading, zone change 1046. That's on Wicks Lane. Councilmember Aspenlighter will be recusing himself on that, but is there somebody who'd like to take that forward? Councilmember Boyette.
I'd like to move that we approve number N, second final reading ordinance of zone change 1046 located at 1202 Wicks Lane.
Second.
Okay, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Discussion. Either of you like to speak to your motion? Councilmember Boyette.
More than, well, I don't know, maybe 60 years ago, I used to hunt out there. We used to hunt antelope out there, and it's the worst ground in the world to build on. And the presentation we had a couple of weeks ago showed that it was the worst ground to build on. And this was an appropriate facility to be put on it. I understand that people want housing, but it's next to a power plant, basically. The ground, they talked about how bad the ground was, and it's like 24 feet difference between one end to the other end. It'd be really difficult to build suitable housing there. I think this is a good project for there. Plus, the pictures were wonderful. I couldn't believe the rendering. It was really nice.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor. This was my separation simply because I wasn't able to be here when this was discussed the other
I'm
night.
sorry, I didn't realize I would have started with you.
That's all right. It ended up at the same place we were anyhow. So I simply separated this for the purposes of being recorded as a no vote on this. Respectfully, I don't agree that this project meets the zone change criteria. And I am deeply concerned, and I think there is a lack of attention to the critical need for quality development along the Inner Belt Loop corridor. This whole area needs to be developed in a way that supports the maintenance and the maintenance of this road and the overall well-being of the Heights neighborhood. I am deeply concerned about a narrative in this community that says the Inner Belt Loop can be nothing but industrial construction or industrial development. That's absolutely not true. I don't believe this is an appropriate plot for housing, but I'm not sure that we have really thought about what we want collectively along the Inner Belt Loop, and I think that continues to be a item that is kicked down the road, and it will be to our detriment. We need to encourage a quality vision along this corridor that represents a active spaces that represents high quality of life for both not just the Heights, but the entire community overall. And I think this is setting an unfortunate precedent. I do not believe it's consistent with the growth plans, which are wildly outdated for the Heights. And I do not believe it provides the kind of tax revenue we will need to maintain these corridors over time. So I understand these conversations happened while I wasn't able to be here. I simply wanted to put my concerns on the record to urge that we prioritize the Inner Belt Loop vision work and economic planning work, which I understand will happen separate from the Heights neighborhood plan, and then simply to be recorded as a no vote. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion, which is for approval of item 1N? Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I did not support this item when it first came to us, and so I will not support this item, again, citing the same reasons for time what Jennifer talked about. So again, I really encourage the city to really take time to look at the planning of this whole corridor and start discussions now with the landowners so we can actually get some kind of overlay district set up there to move forward with, so we know what's going to be developed and support that area. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval, item 1N. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Voting in opposition, council members Neese, Owen, and Tidswell. All other council members, with the exception of Councilmember Aspenlighter, voting in favor. The motion passes. That concludes item 1 and brings us to our regular agenda. Tony, would you read item 2?
Item number 2, public hearing for land use contrary to zoning. Homefront duplex in an NX3 zone located at 302 Sioux Lane. No action necessary.
Thank you very much. Zoning coordinator Nicole Cromwell is bringing up the PowerPoint. She will explain, but my understanding, council, is on this item, the council is not being asked to vote to make any sort of decision. Nicole will explain why, but we do need to have a public hearing, and so anybody who is with us tonight and who came to be to comment on item 2, the Homefront new duplex on at 302 South Lane, we'll give you an opportunity to comment in a couple minutes after staff presentation and some questions of staff.
That would be up to Tony, I think. And it's not letting me choose to duplicate the screen, so I don't know if people can see it that are on Zoom. In any case, land use contrary to zoning has been a part of this Montana State Code for land use for a very, very long time. Previous to 2021, all of these applications went before the Board of Adjustment. In 2021, an amendment was made, sponsored by Bill Mercer, to put that public hearing in front of governing bodies and not your appointed Board of Adjustment. So that's why you're seeing these now. This is your third one since 2021. And it's only available to public agencies who are using public land that is somehow contrary to the local zoning regulations. So this would apply to landfills, airports, shooting ranges for police departments, et cetera, et cetera. So it's only public agencies. Homefront is a public agency under the consideration of the state law. They are proposing to build one final duplex on a property that's currently zoned NX3 that requires a minimum 5-unit building. So duplexes are not an allowed use. So if you could go down. So here's the subject property. You can see the zoning to the north is NX3, the zoning to the south in a different neighborhood is second neighborhood N2. So it's also connected to the west with the Twin Oaks subdivision and Uinta Park subdivision. Go ahead. Here's an aerial view of the subject property. The kind of open space there on the lower left of the subject property is where this proposed duplex would go. Go ahead. Here is the site plan that was submitted by High Plains Architect, who's working with Homefront on this new build here. This will also include some additional parking spaces just for this duplex and to connect those two parcels together. There are several different parcels, all Homefront owned, so it'll be the completion of this side of Sioux Lane. This does not change zoning. It does not affect the north side of Sioux Lane, which will be a master site plan to build several buildings out of the buildings that are now being stored on that lot. Go ahead. Here's a subject property if you're looking south on Sioux Lane. Go ahead. This is an office support space building. This is you looking south and east towards the already completed part of Falcon Run Apartments. Go ahead. And then looking west on Sioux Lane, as you can see, some of those units that are now stored on the north side of Sioux Lane. Go ahead. And then looking north and east to the playground and public space that's adjacent to the existing apartments on the north side of Sioux Lane. Go ahead. So this is just to gather public comment and to give feedback to the developer, Homefront, on the project. There's no need for you, and you can't really apply conditions, deny or approve the project. It's just to receive public comment. And that's it.
Very good. Before we go to public comment, are there questions for Nicole about either the project or the process? Nicole, just clarify, the existing NX3 would require 5 units. This is 2 units, it's a duplex. There's already a couple other buildings, so the 5 units is not on the parcel, but in the structure itself? I mean, they're
That is
already.
correct.
Okay, so to fully comply with existing zoning, this concrete structure would have to have 5 units instead of 2?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councilmember Owen?
I have 2 questions, Mayor, is that all right? Okay, so I just want to follow up on the mayor's question. Does that really make sense? I mean, why, I understand that we want to encourage more density, but it doesn't it strikes me that there's much more of a public policy issue if someone wants to go more density that is planned for than less density. So do you think that this sort of requiring more attention when they come in a little bit under does this make good sense?
Well, it's the only way they can, there's another way for them to do it. They could have requested a variance from the minimum number of units, but that's a larger process.
No, I'm meaning as a matter of policy, what we've written into the code, does this make sense?
In order to make our zone districts predictable, when we did recode, we had RMF, which was like no building height, any number of units, much more dense. And then we had RMFR. We only had 2 districts. And so it was completely unpredictable because you could do single family in RMF and RMFR. You could do duplexes, 3plexes, 4plexes. So there was no predictability of what you were going to get. So when we redesigned the multifamily districts, we said, okay, NX1 should be 1 to 4, and that's predictable for folks. NX2, we'll step it up. We'll go to 2 to 8 unit buildings, nothing over 8. And then when we get to NX3, which is the most dense and the most flexible, we want to start at 5. Because it's a district we don't want to apply everywhere. We want to do it in certain locations. So, and it makes that zone very predictable too. So when somebody proposes a 2-unit building in a district that says minimum 5, that kind of takes it back down the predictability scale. So doing the land use contrary zoning for public agencies is the way to go. A private developer could do the same thing, but we probably recommend that they do a zone change instead.
Well, I don't want to debate this at length because I have a second question, but I would generally think that the concern about predictability is not being more dense than expected rather than less dense, but we can debate that at a later date. The second thing that I want to ask you, and this you may not be able to answer, and that's okay, if you wanted to go back and get an answer in writing or just take it as a note back to the team, but Montana law requires that our building codes, that our work try to be as welcoming to modern building techniques and building materials as possible. So based on what you've observed through this process of bringing 3D printing into the community, are we doing that? Do we have a mindset towards the sort of modern techniques, the evolution of materials, being as cutting edge as we possibly can? Are we there, or is there more to be done in terms of making it clear that we are open to new building techniques?
I think our current building division is very open to new building techniques. I don't think they have discouraged this project at all. I think it's a matter of, there were delays in getting the project really designed and ready to go. And it is a new technology. I mean, it's fairly new in any case, 3D printing of buildings and structures. So, but I don't think that we have been resistive to that at all.
Okay. Mayor, I'm done with my questions, but are we going to hear from the project developers?
I was just going to suggest that at some point, but let's finish with any questions for Nicole. One thing I'm going to be curious about is whether the technology would allow for a larger structure, because it is new. I would assume in a bit of experimental, smaller is probably safer, but I don't know. We'll find out. But let's hear if there's any other questions for Nicole before we go to the developer. Councilmember Neese?
Mayor, I was going to have the same questions of the developer, so.
Okay. Anything else for Nicole? Don't see anything. So, Nicole, I see a representative from the architect with us, but I'm not sure if Homefront or somebody else, whoever would like to comment, maybe could come to the podium. I'm sure they're, Tim, or all of you. I mean, it's not too crowded up there. Go ahead. Just bring everybody.
Mayor, council. You asked about size.
Yeah, I think we were just curious about the technology and the feasibility for using the 3D printing for even larger, more multi-unit properties.
Yeah, so we can go bigger. This particular parcel that we're looking at is only so big. We can only go, we're at probably the max capacity now. The only direction we could go up is up. So we can't go any further as far as, that first floor square footage, but we could definitely go up. Is that correct, Randy?
Let's tag team this thing.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think that the point here is this site is fundamentally built out. Homefront does own it. The space actually that we're working on was the detention area for the stormwater. We've had to rework that, but there was just kind of a little space left that was just big enough to do a 2-unit, reasonably a 2-unit. It is new technology. Tim's been working on this thing for a long time. We all have, to the point of a question about the building department. They have not been the problem at all. We had some challenges with the initial company that was supposed to provide the equipment and so forth. They didn't have enough test data to get past the city, which was fair enough. In any case, and Tim can speak more about that, but the issue is this site actually predated the NX3 as well. So when it was redone, it became NX3, but this was like this little opportunity because we could reuse and make that space overall more dense by adding 2 units. And also, it's an experiment. We don't know how this is all going to work. We didn't really want to get into doing a whole huge number of these until we've tested it out and made sure it's going to work the way we hope it does.
Are these just one story?
One story, yes.
Some other questions, probably. Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. So given the technology, and is it able to do like a fourplex where it is 4-story, or not 4 stories, but 2 stories, or maybe even more? What is the capability of this technology? As I did a little research, I mean, again, I don't know about remember stories, but I saw massive places in Texas being built with these huge ones that went back and forth, and like yours, it goes around and around. So what is the capability of this technology as far as building upwards?
The particular printer that we'll be bringing here this summer will be 3-story capability, is the way that we had the manufacturer produce it. Because the initial printer, we were limited to just under 11 feet. And as we, discussed with clients around the state, an issue that we ran into was we want to go up. And we could go up, but the machine was limited. And so this one will just be able to go straight up to that 3-story.
Okay. So if the technology is, you could have put a fourplex in there instead of a townhome or something like that, if you had the correct equipment or different equipment, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
We could have done a multiple story with the original, but I think we were just kind of set on that first. We didn't want to get too big of a project for that initial one.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilor Tidswell, Councilor Boyette?
So, Tim, you're saying that the size of the project is only limited by the machinery that you're bringing in to do it?
Well, in this particular case, I would say that the size of the project is probably limited to the parcel that it's on.
Granted, but the technology itself?
Yeah, there's going to be there's limitations as far as how big, but in this particular case, we could go up higher, but we can't go out, any further as far as width and length. Right now, we're like at right under 1,200 square feet, and it's pretty tight.
Councilor Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. So, Tim, we all want to come see this. Would you let the council know when and if this starts? We'd like to come see it.
Yeah, you all are on the list.
Can we put our hands in the wet cement?
You'll have to take that up with Homefront.
Okay, all right. Councilor Joy?
Thank you. I just had one question about the economic feasibility in terms of how affordable is this as a way of mass producing housing? Thank you.
I think there's potential for it. In this particular case, I'm not sure it's going to be a model for that. And maybe Randy could speak to that a little bit better, just because we're using some materials and products that are on the high performance side of things versus what you see in a lot more of the conventional building.
I would say, in a general sense, that the first time you try something new, that's not going to be the model for what it could cost. I mean, it's the first cell phone cost way more than they cost now. Well, that may not be true. So it's computers. But in any case, we're doing a smaller project, not because this is going to be a model necessarily for the eventual economics, but to just make sure that the system works in our climate, that we get what we think we're getting. And then we'll take a look at what it costs to get to here, and then we're going to learn a ton in the process, which will then help, if we're in the ballpark, will help us figure out how to do better and get the economics where we'd like them to be so that they could be effective. I mean, that's the goal. That's what we're hoping for, but we have to do a first one to find out. And so that's another reason why we didn't want to do more units. And we especially didn't want to really do 2 stories at this point in time. It's like, how much do we want to chew off or bite off if we can't really chew it? So this is a smaller project. This should be a really nice project, and if it ends up being the only one of its kind, then it's going to be a really nice little project. If it turns out that this is a great thing when we get finished, then we'll do more of it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions before we go to a public hearing? I don't see any, so I'm not sure if there's anybody here from the public who would like to comment, but if there is, please come to the podium. You know the routine.
Yes, thank you. Mayor, members of council, Dan Brooks with the Billings Chamber at 815 South 27th Street. I know you don't have to make a decision tonight, but I just wanted to come up here and voice my enthusiastic support for 2 more units of housing in Billings. That's a low enough number, even us Marines can count that high. But you all know and are very aware of our housing needs here in Billings. Homefront has a waiting list of 7,000 plus. A recent 2022 study updated by the DBA and Bethesda shows that 4 of our top 5 occupations, about 36,000 Billings residents, don't make enough to afford a median home. So we've got to be looking at new innovative ways to solve our housing challenges. So I want to thank Homefront and Bespoke Montana, Tim Stark just up here, and High Plains Architects for coming together, collaborating, thinking about an innovative solution that they sounded pretty hesitant, and I suppose I would be too, but boy, I'm really optimistic because I see a lot of uses for the 3D printing technology in our community. Those of you council members that I've spoken with about housing, I'm real keen and I don't want to stop talking about ADUs. There's a lot of potential applications there for people being able to use a lower cost technology and be able to add housing to their current home. So I look forward to what might materialize there as far as adding housing to Billings, and just end with an enthusiastic support for adding more housing to Billings, and thank you to those who are involved in this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Any other public comment on item number 2? Okay, no one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment period, the public hearing on item number 2. And with that, I think we've concluded item number 2. Nicole, I just want to make sure that there's nothing else you need from us. She agrees that we're done with item number 2. Councilmember Owen?
Before you just fully close that, before Homefront leaves, really wanted to commend the whole team for continuing to invest in the Heights. I know you tried to do this 3D printing at Stefanich Lane and we couldn't make that project happen. So really wanted to say to Randy, to Tim, and to everybody at Homefront, thank you for continuing to invest in our portion of the community. We are so excited to be the home of these innovations, both these and the other incredible projects you have going on up there. So really just thank you for the partnership and for the investment. We are excited to be on the cusp of housing innovation for this, not just the city, but the state. So thank you guys. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, Tony, would you read item number 3? But before you do, council, my understanding, and staff will explain this, but we have 3 sub items here, of course. The presentation, I believe, will be on all three as a package, and then we'll have a combined public hearing on all three, but we will need to have separate votes, and we'll address each one individually when it comes to time for discussion and for motions. Staff is bringing up the PowerPoint.
Item number 3, public hearing and first reading ordinances amending Billings, Montana City Code, sections A 18-300 nuisances, B 18-1100 graffiti, C 18-1400 boarded up structures.
Very good, thank you.
Mayor, can they adjust the screen so that it's not blocked?
Yeah, Tony, any luck in removing the Zoom?
I've had no luck.
No luck.
Well, if it helps,
Okay.
Wyeth has this. Oh, he has? Okay, so yeah.
Do you see Wyatt there?
He's still here.
He's still there, okay.
He has a copy of this, so I don't really, I mean, if he's the only one online, I don't know that we need to share it with him.
Will he be able to see our slide where we're at?
I've got his laptop on his lap right now, looking at it, if I know Wyeth.
Okay, so Wyeth, we're going to minimize or eliminate the screen, the Zoom screen. Hopefully that does not cause any problems for you. You heard Tina say that we think you've got it. But Tina, as you go through, maybe you can just always say where we're at.
Sure.
So that Wyeth stays oriented. That would be great. And I don't know if you heard me say before, it's my understanding that we'll have a presentation on all three of these items. We'll have a joint public hearing, separate votes. But if I got that right, great. And if I got it wrong, if you can set us straight. So give it back to you.
I initially submitted it as one, but they decided to separate it out, which I think is fine. We can do it either way. Bringing tonight 3 ordinance amendments to you, and then also item 4 is going to be the resolution for establishing the graffiti fund, which is separate. So this is really the only slide that I have for you tonight. It covers the conversation we had at work session on February 20th, and some other conversations we had prior to that, to bring you what we had at the work session. And I itemized the issues that we discussed, that council had some questions and concerns about. So to start, removed the and/or upgrade to all of the language, and we just left it as and. That seemed to cause some concern for council, so we're fine with leaving it as and I've done that throughout all 3 of the ordinances. So since we're doing these separately, nuisance, we had a typo. I got a little excited with the cut and paste, so I fixed the definition for enforcement officer. We kept responsible person in there because we were discussing responsible person, responsible party. They have different meanings in each of those ordinances for nuisance and for graffiti. And further down, you'll see that we added a definition for perpetrator, so I think that cleans up the problem that we were having with responsible party and person. We kept the 3 or more vehicles. I did get an email or 2 concern from some citizens that they didn't want it to go to the 1. So we'll leave it at 3. And then we changed the language from trespassing to criminal activity in the prohibition section 5, what is that? Subsection 9. So that's the one for nuisance. Did you want me to go through all of them?
Why don't you, and then we'll
Okay.
treat them as a package.
Yeah, graffiti, again, we added definition for perpetrator, we kept responsible party, and then we have the resolution, of course, that's item number 4. And then for boarded up structures, I think the only input we really needed out of that discussion was whether or not you wanted to grandfather in, and I believe that's the direction we're going. Is that any building in violation moving forward, if the ordinance is approved, the amendments are approved. That was my understanding.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Anything else, Tina?
Did you want me to address your email?
Let's hold off on that. We'll come back to it. We'll see if there's underlying motions, and we'll get into more deeply. But questions for Tina before any sort of public hearing? Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Tina, I just want to clarify on the boarded up structures change and the grandfathering. We're not saying that anybody that's boarded up now is going to be fined in perpetuity, right? We're going to start as soon as this passes, getting them addressed.
Well, and that's what I'm leaning towards. That's what I would like to see. However, I did not get a clear decision from council. I wasn't exactly clear on how you wanted me to proceed. If you wanted me to go back to some of these buildings that have been boarded like that from the beginning of the ordinance and move forward, I'm perfectly fine with doing that. If that's what
My
council
understanding
wants.
from the conversation before was that we didn't think it would be fair to say if the building is out there already now, that the last 4 months that they've been boarded up would count against them. But on day one, after this passes, we would like you to go and say, here's your 6-month notice. And that's what I would consider grandfathering, and hopefully that was consistent with the rest of council's understanding of that conversation.
Okay, so if I'm clear, if it's currently boarded, this passes, once it goes into effect, you want me to address that boarded structure? That's exactly what I wanted to hear, thank you. I agree.
Okay. Other questions for Tina? Councilmember Brown?
Tina, when we talked a little bit about this car issue, you had mentioned that it didn't really matter what we did here because there's another place in the code where there's just one car. Can you walk us through that and whether or not we need to resolve that?
Yes, well, we're fine with the way it is because we currently, when we do have one vehicle that is an issue, we are able to address that under ordinance 27-1307, I believe, which is basically an off-street storage type of situation.
Okay.
So we can address it. If we get a complaint on it, again, most of our stuff is complaint-driven. I respect the, grandpa's truck and you want to rebuild it. Totally get that. So I think we're going to be safe leaving it 3 or more under nuisance, we're going to probably be bringing you that other ordinance as well eventually because we have some questions that we want to clarify with the off-street.
Yeah, that was my question, is do we need to make the two of them the same?
We're going to bring that one as well. So initially, I had about 6 ordinances I wanted to bring to you, and then 3 has been a trip. So I'm going to do these one at a time from the moving forward. So I will probably be bringing that one to you as well. It's in need of attention.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
If I can just go back to recommend, or on this issue of grandfathering boarded up structures to only look retroactively, not for future behavior. Gina, Councilmember Ripsis, at some point when we get to item 3C, we'll have to look at that language and actually make a change if we're going to adopt it tonight. So I don't know, we don't have to address it right now, but if you get a chance, take a look and see if there's a simple change, because we'll have to agree on the language. So, okay, other questions for Tina, Councilmember or Councilmember Joy?
Thank you. And this was my, the thing I brought up previously, and council didn't really weigh in, so I'm still concerned about the definition of graffiti. Graffiti means any unauthorized, and it describes all of those various things. And farther in says, to the extent that the graffiti was not authorized in advance by the owner or occupant of the building, or despite advanced authorization, constitutes a public nuisance as described. To me, I just don't understand that definition. On what basis? Suppose there was a person who considered themselves a graffiti artist. Under what circumstances would they be able, with the authorization of the owner, to put something up and not be in violation of the graffiti ordinance?
Well, there you're looking at if it's authorized by the owner of the property and they're looking at it as art. That is a debate as to whether it is graffiti or if it is an art installation. There's a lot of murals going up right now, and some of the folks that are painting those are actually graffiti artists as well.
Okay, so your clarification is simply that, well, I guess I need to know, who deems it graffiti then? So if someone says, they're not putting like a name or something where it's like really obvious, like a tagging, but something, then who is going to be really deciding whether or not that's graffiti? The owner of the building or the artist? Or the person making it? Who's going to really
The
be
owner of the
deciding?
building. So if someone's putting something on their building and it's not authorized by them, then it's considered graffiti.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Dees?
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because I'm not so sure I understand this, because it sounds to me like, as I read this, even if the owner says, I'm approving it, then it's also considered a public nuisance. Am I not reading that correctly, or?
No, if it's a public nuisance if it's not authorized. If it's authorized by the property owner to be on his building or her building, it would not be considered.
So then where does the despite advance authorization comes into play? Why don't we just strike that line?
Let me read it through real quick here.
Can you refer to us the
I'm sorry,
section number?
It's on page 2 of 11, section 181102.
The definitions in graffiti.
Thank you.
It'd be the last sentence.
Todd? Sorry, I'm distracting. Right, so I think this was the section where we were leaving it to where if it is offensive, is that where we were going with that one?
I believe so.
Okay. I'll let Todd answer this question.
I mean, from my perspective anyway, the real issue only comes up if it's authorized graffiti. Unauthorized or non-consensual graffiti, so to speak, is not going to be an issue. And in my mind, it's, I believe it's probably a policy decision. Do you want to allow people to, with the consent of the property owner, do what might be otherwise considered to be graffiti or, a nuisance sort of addition to property?
Well, and I think that's a good policy question, but it goes back to the question Councilmember Joy asked is, so then who decides whether it's graffiti or not?
Well, I think, frankly, probably you guys do. What language would you like to use to define graffiti? I mean, we've offered a suggestion, but if you believe it encompasses activity that you are all right with, then we need to consider an amendment to it. But we have offered one we think is appropriate for for the enforcement by code.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm not following you when we say we're looking at the definition here. It's stating that even though they've got advanced authorization, it constitutes a public nuisance. So it sounds to me like maybe Tom, if you can figure this out, that would be helpful.
And I've got a thought, but Councilor Rips is.
So that description refers to the definition of public nuisance in 18302, which says a situation created or allowed to continue by the owner or occupant of real property which may endanger or be injurious to public safety or health, is offensive to the senses, renders any public right-of-way dangerous for passage, adversely affects the property values of adjacent properties, or obstructs the free use of property, right? So offensive to the senses and affects neighboring property values. I think we could all imagine cases where somebody might put up some graffiti and call it art, but the subject matter is obscene or profane and could certainly impact other properties around it. So I think that's obviously what we're trying to get at in this section.
Okay, I see. So you have to go to 18302 to see what is. All right, thank you. I think that clarifies it for me.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Kennedy.
On section 181116, on the anti-graffiti fund, the council will create the fund And then the expenditures of money in the fund, will it come back here, or who will make the decision on who gets the funding to remove the graffiti? Does each of those cases come back to the council? I was unsure on that.
Shortly, no, it would be its designee. It says the council or its designee. The fund is designed, it was in there originally. It's designed for rewards for information. It is also designed for
I hope it's for,
removal. That would be under an abatement order, which we generally run that out of our abatement fund anyway.
what about when illegal graffiti is put on people's fences, on their house, things like that? Would that pay to have that cleaned up?
No, it would be the responsibility of the property owner. And if they did not remove it, then code enforcement would work with them to get it removed, eventually getting an abatement order if they chose not to remove it. And then the city would treat it just like a public nuisance. We would go out, we would abate it, charge them. If they don't pay it, we assess their taxes.
Why wouldn't we expand this to help the homeowner that someone came in and graffitied up their fence or their home?
I'm sorry, repeat that question?
Why would we not expand this to help out the actual homeowner that had an illegal graffiti on their home or their fence?
I would imagine it's a financial reason. If that's something that the council wants to do, we wanted to establish this fund more so for the reward portion, because we would like more people to report. We would like to have more prosecutions. We generally do get compliance. When we don't, then we do have a fund in our abatement fund to take care of those things, which is all general fund taxpayer money.
I get concerned over the innocent citizen that had graffiti on their home, and then they're a senior and they can't afford to remove it, and we have no means except going back, abating it, and charge them. I have a concern over that.
I'm concerned over it too, but I don't know that, that's been discussed before as far as having a fund to do that. And I don't have a full-time graffiti abatement person anyway.
Chris wanted to comment, if that's okay, Councilor Kennedy?
That would
Chris?
be good, Chris.
Well, two thoughts come to my mind. One, Tina, think about have scenarios where the individual literally hasn't been able to get it removed. Have we worked with them, elderly, et cetera? But second, or earlier, my concern would be, frankly, if we create a fund like that, and that's what's known to exist, I have a concern that people say, oh, good, the government's going to take care of this for me now. And now we have to have a whole robust system to be out there removing graffiti. So I think on the rare case where we don't get any cooperation, and we see someone genuinely unable to remove it, has that happened, Tina, in your time? Or have you seen those scenarios where an individual really out of a hardship can't get it taken care of?
Really not out of a hardship, but we have had folks where they own a building, and we've actually, because we do get donated paint and supplies and things like that, we've offered through a voluntary abatement form to go out and take care of it for them. And they sign that waiver, and with the donated paint, my staff goes out and paints it. So there is a mechanism in place to help those who maybe really truly cannot afford it or can't get to it, or we just have some volunteers that want to do a project. We do have that. And I know in some larger cities, they do have graffiti abatement teams, and they probably are financed the way that you're recommending or suggesting. but I just don't think that we have that at this point. I think we're able to, with the changes in this ordinance, we're able to hold those property owners accountable under a municipal infraction, which also is a lesser type of charge. It's not a misdemeanor anymore. So, and most of the time, we gain compliance before we even have to step in court.
Okay. I just wanted to hear the other part, that you do help them and you supply paint and things like that. Thank you.
We do, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Owen?
Mayor, on this same topic, I just wanted to add a little food for thought. We just had a training in our jail subcommittee last week on sort of what's going on with gang violence in the community. And one of the things that was stressed was obviously the urgency of graffiti removal, to really be very aggressive as a community. And we were sort of challenged to think about the public policy around this, because on the one hand, we tend to think about it as a property maintenance. You are expected as a resident of this community to maintain and keep your property up to a certain standard. But the countervailing argument is you're twice victimized. First, there was an infraction committed on your property, and then we make you pay to fix it. And it was a different way that I had not thought about, to consider it through the lens of public safety. It's one of the rare times where we say you've been victimized by someone, now it's your job to fix that. And so I just tossed that out as food for thought. Not today, obviously, because I think you're right, we don't have those resources, but it's worth considering when we think about our public safety strategies to really push back on crime, and to say, you know, this is not the place where you can do business, to just think about how we fund some of these more lower level issues.
Thank you, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And I would kind of like to add on to what Councilmember Owen said. A property owner on Minnesota Avenue has been tagged repeatedly, and it's a never-ending process for him to remove the graffiti off of his property. And as we were talking about graffiti and definitions, and whether it's authorized or unauthorized, whether it's offensive, these kinds of issues, he said, well, look at me, I'm on Minnesota Avenue, I get tagged all the time, they're over here telling me I need to clean it up, I've been victimized twice, and right across the railroad tracks, they call it a mural. So, I mean, just adding that into what we're thinking about, and I appreciate Councilmember Owens bringing forward the kind of thought processes that are going on in terms of how we address it as a public safety issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you whether there's any other questions for Tina or Todd, and if there aren't, we will, I suggest that we take a break. When we have to come back, we'll then, and actually I'll open up for public hearing just to make, I don't see any members of the public, then we'll come back and we'll deal with each one of these items individually, dig into each one. So that would be my plan. Are there any other questions for Tina? Councilmember Kennedy.
Tina, on the abandoned structures, these changes, does this affect at all the property on 8th and Yellowstone?
That property is moving forward, so, and it would be under the old ordinance anyway, because we've already have it filed in court. But that property is moving forward in the process, so.
Thank you.
I promise you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Tina? And this is not to say you won't be able to ask Tina questions once we have individual motions in front of us on the individual items. But anything else for Tina before we take a break or open up for public comment? Okay, I don't see any. So Tina, thank you very much. Just so that the record is clear, this is a public hearing, joint public hearing on items 3A, 3B, and 3C. Is there anybody with us who would like to comment on the proposed ordinance changes that are part of 3A, 3B, or 3C? Is there anybody here to comment on those items? No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public hearing on items 3A, 3B, and 3C. And council will take a brief break, come back. It's 7:34. We'll come back as close to 7:40, that's 6 minutes, as possible.
What is the day you're going out to the job?
Okay. We're back. We left off, we've had a public hearing and presentation on all three of the sub-items under item 3. We'll go back then to item 3A, just dealing with nuisances. And council, I guess I would request a motion relating to this. If the motion is for approval as drafted, I know I'll have some amendments, but rather than mucking things up by talking about that first, let's get an underlying motion on the table. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance, the nuisance ordinance as presented.
Councilmember Tidswell? Okay, very good. Did either of you want to address your motion, or should we jump into amendments? Councilmember Neese?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Tina and her team for bringing these type of changes to the city council. It's been long overdue. And this is really, a lot of this has to do with the public for approving the public safety mill levy several years ago. And Tina's taken on a huge task to kind of revitalize and build up this department. And so, again, Tina, you and your team have been great. Great to see these changes. I think the public is going to see a lot of great things throughout the city. It's going to be a little safer. This is, again, we talked about a team of horses. This is just one of those horses in the barn that we're going to use and get going. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Tidswell, you had the second. Do you want to address your second?
Yeah, I just want to, again, echo what Roy said. You've done a tremendous job and what you continue to bring to the table. We love it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to hear
Very good.
that.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion before I offer an amendment, or at least offer something for discussion? Okay. So I sent around an email this afternoon raising what's really a policy issue, a basic policy issue. And I just want to start by commenting that this is a huge step forward. We need to get tough on our nuisance properties. Tina and her people have done a great job in doing that, and this is a huge, huge step in the right direction. There's just parts of the Section 18303 that I want to raise for the council for a discussion. This is sort of a little introduction, I guess, that tries to summarize my thoughts here. So the email I sent around focuses on Section 18303, and you've got copies that I handed out before, and it deals with what does it take to make a nuisance property. And we're 95% of these changes, I think, are just great. I am concerned that the code as written will make it possible to declare a property to be a public nuisance if, as a result of someone else's criminal behavior, and without any wrongdoing on the part of the property owner, the property is twice tagged with graffiti in a 2-year period, or the property is in a location where criminal behavior by someone else is reported to the police department. Many businesses call the Billings Police Department to report graffiti, shoplifting, disturbing the peace, bar fights, skipping on a bill, or other criminal activity as a regular part of their business. And at some businesses, like at our hospitals, Walmart, Target, Ace Hardware, various convenience stores, these reports are made on a very regular basis. However, under Section 18303, subparagraph 5, as currently drafted, a business that twice reports graffiti and any other criminal behavior in a 2-year period would be 2/3 the way towards meeting the criteria to being declared a public nuisance, because you've got to get 3 out of about 17 different options. And under Section 18303.6, the next subsection there, any of those businesses would be automatically deemed a public nuisance if it were determined that they were a, quote, location where persons gather for the purpose of engaging in unlawful conduct. Although the goal of cracking down on nuisance properties is a good one, and we need to be more aggressive in doing so, in my opinion, the ends do not justify the means. The purpose of the changes that I sent around by email, which I can describe more specifically in a second, is to protect the property owners who are innocent victims of criminal behavior while still requiring abatement of a public nuisance if it can be shown that the property owner or other responsible person should have done something to prevent or mitigate the criminal activity. Admittedly, by adding a requirement that a property owner must be shown to have done something wrong or to have not done something that they could have done to prevent the problem, this will make it harder to prosecute these cases, and staff has very real concern about that. But again, in my opinion at least, just because a goal is a good one, that doesn't justify relying on means that are unfair or potentially illegal. We can, in my opinion, still get tough on nuisance properties by relying more on those other 15 criteria that can be used to establish a public nuisance. And when it comes to these provisions, being careful to specify what the property owner or responsible person should have done differently and why they are not just an innocent victim of someone else's criminal behavior. So that's the introduction. The specific 3 changes that are in the piece of paper that it handed out. First, subsection 5, I would amend under I little x, so Roman numeral small 9. Right now it says, and again, you need 3 of these things to constitute a nuisance property. So one of those options is, quote, 2 or more reports to the police department or code enforcement division of building exteriors, walls, fences, driveways, or walkways which have been defaced by graffiti within a 24-month period. That's where it stops. So 2 or more reports. I would propose adding and which were not painted over, covered, or otherwise abated as required under section 181106 or any other provision of this code. Second, under X, it currently says 2 or more reports to the police department or code enforcement division of criminal activity on the property within a 24-month period. So criminal activity, 2 or more reports in 24 months. I would suggest adding involving circumstances that suggest an owner or responsible person unreasonably permitted, enabled, or was otherwise complicit in said criminal activity and not merely an innocent victim of the same. And I'll just refer to these changes as 1, 2, and 3. And then so number 3, the third one would be to subparagraph 6 that says that a public nuisance would be creating or maintaining any premises, subparagraph B, any location where persons gather for the purpose of engaging in unlawful conduct. That's the existing provision. I would suggest adding the words on a regular, repeated, or predictable basis that might be prevented or materially mitigated by an owner or responsible person through the exercise of reasonable means. So I will go ahead and deal with these in order. Why don't we do that? So I would make the motion to add proposed amendment number 1 dealing with subparagraph 5, Roman numeral 9, dealing with the graffiti within reports within 24 months, just so we have something to talk about.
Second.
Is there a second by Councilmember Neese? Okay. So I've already spoken at length. I think you get the point. I just do want to make clear that staff is concerned about these. This is, I think, a pretty central policy issue. So, but we do have Todd Korn and also Tina and also Gina with us. So, Councilmember Neese, if you want to address your second, and I see Councilmember Owen's hand.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have concern that, as you mentioned, that we are not causing normal, everyday citizens to be, suddenly find themselves in a nuisance situation. And so it is, I think some of this, I think you're right, this could make it a little bit harder in some of these, but as far as number one, I think it seems reasonable, but I would like to hear from staff and city attorney on this to see really what impact it would have as far as trying to enforce this, both pros and cons as far as adding this language in here, or if there's other language that you could add that would be accomplish the same thing to protect.
Okay, and Councilmember Neese, before we go to staff, Councilmember Neese, or Owen, did you have something before we go to staff?
Well, I have some alternative language ideas, so Mayor, I don't know if you want them to speak to what's there, or if you want me to toss out an alternative and let them speak to both at the same time, however you'd like to proceed.
Councilmember Neese, would that be okay? Because it might be the staff says they like Councilmember Owen's language and they don't like mine, and then it might be problem solved, but I don't know that.
I think that would be a good idea, because if they're going to comment on language, whether it's yours or Councilmember Owens, I think that would be fine.
Okay, then Councilmember, go ahead.
Thank you,
Owen,
Mayor.
go ahead.
So I guess I am with you in wanting to protect the sort of innocent owner, but I think I would share the staff's concern that we're creating now multiple factors that have to be proven in court. And I think that's suboptimal. I would argue that on the face of the language as it's presented by staff, we don't have that problem, because the requirement that you hit 3 of the criteria, these 2 would allow you to be innocent, the 2 you've identified here, Mayor, but none of the others would. So if you just had a facility that was being tagged by graffiti and had this criminal activity, you'd still have to have a 3rd criteria, all of which are pointed at you allowing your facility to go into disrepair. So I think you could make the argument that we've already protected the innocent owner. However, I'm wondering if we couldn't get at the same thing through a different approach that wouldn't require multiple burdens of fact, or multiple proving of facts. So I'm wondering if we, in both cases in 5, both 9 and 10, if we said 2 or more reports from persons other than the owner, and then if we tighten the time period, because the 24-month requirement really almost gets us to random. I mean, getting tagged twice in 24 months it's hard to suggest that that's a chronic problem. And so I wonder if we really tighten that down to maybe 6 months or 3 months, where you're just getting tagged all the time, or you have people trespassing chronically. Now you're really not looking like an innocent owner. Whereas, I mean, if you get tagged twice in 2 years, that could happen to anybody. So I'm wondering if we encourage owners to report, so we don't count their reports against them, and then tighten up that time period. If that, combined with the fact that you have to meet at least 3 criteria, does enough to protect what would arguably be innocent owners. And so that would be something I would just toss out for discussion at this point.
Very good. Why don't we turn it over to staff to comment? I believe the current time period is 12 months, so we'd be maybe just potentially going back to the way it is. Yeah. So, but Todd?
Thank you. I just would first say that, and I'll just call them 1 and 2. Mayor, I like your designation for that. That 1 and 2 are already in the code, exactly as written, with the exception that the time period has been expanded from the current 12 months to 24 months. That was done with an idea of, frankly, a more aggressive enforcement policy against nuisance properties. And as to number 2 in particular, the other change made was to switch criminal activity in place of trespass. Again, with the idea of expanding the ability of code to have some more enforcement reach on nuisance properties. But other than those changes, that language is already in there, and with no other changes made to them. And I would say that my comment on the additional language that's suggested, I would caution you to consider a couple things about that. One of them being, as Councilmember Owen pointed out, and as the mayor did too, it's going to increase the difficulty of enforcement and proof of those matters in court. Whereas now, taking number 2, just for an example, a code officer just simply has to get in touch with PD. Hey, can you run a CFS report, call for service report on this property? How many have there been? Done, and move on. Whereas now, if the suggested language is adopted, the amount of investigation that's going to have to go into each of those reports, what circumstances were involved, was it reasonable, was it unreasonable, was there something that was the owner complicit, was the owner an innocent victim? Frankly, you're talking now about law enforcement investigative level, not code investigative level, or and that applies to maybe to a lesser extent to item number 1. And then as to item number 3, I would say first that this was inserted into the ordinance as a response to suggestion or request from council to be able to more aggressively focus on properties where there was criminal activity going on. And the language that we adopted for that purpose in subsection B comes straight out of the criminal code without amendment. I can't right now think of the side of that code, but it's the public nuisance criminal. 45.8, 111. Ex-officers handed have around. But anyway, that language came straight out of there. And so I would have the same comment as to the suggested additions as to the increased level of difficulty that's going to exist in putting a case like that together, as well as presented it in court. I would also say as to all 3, that the additional language combined with the additional effort that's going to be required to put one of these cases together is going to slow down the enforcement process. Because the first step of the enforcement process, once the investigation has been done, before anything else can happen, is notice has to go out. And the owner or responsible person, as the case may be, gets a certain period of time to abate or to fix or correct the issue. If they do that, case is done. And that's obviously what code would hope to have happen every single time one of those notices gets sent out. But the notice will not be able to be sent out until the case has been properly reviewed and investigated. I'm just suggesting that if this language is adopted, it's going to create a significant hurdle for them to get over before they can even send that complete the first step of the enforcement process. And candidly also as to the innocent victim, the business owner and so forth, just sitting there minding their own business and these things keep happening. I would suggest that they're probably the exception, not the rule. And I would invite you to strongly consider whether you should take this language and create it around what might be the exception instead of the rule. There also is quite a bit of protection already built in, frankly, to the enforcement process on these particular code sections. And that being one, the fact that there is notice to be sent out first. They just don't simply, hey, here we are, now here's your site and so forth, see you in court. No, there's an opportunity for them to fix it. In fact, some of them get 2. That doesn't end there. If in fact they don't fix it, then go to court. If the court rules in code's favor, the court gives 30 days for them to fix it themselves. So there's quite a lot of protection, at least from my perspective anyway, on this already. In terms of, Councilmember Owen, your suggested language, I'm by no means saying that what we have submitted is infallible or not subject to be looked at or considered differently. And I would say, too, that we went through multiple drafts of this thing. I bring that up only because as we sit down and made some changes, seemed to us to be good, and then go home that night, sleep on it, think about it, come back the next, hey, wait a minute, here's an issue I've seen. So I'm going to, with that thought in mind, I'm going to respond to your suggestion of an owner. I will probably have more tomorrow when I wake up, or perhaps not, but typically my pattern is I would. But my thought on the owner is that I think the owner should be encouraged to do that. I guess, and now, as I'm sitting here thinking, the thought has escaped my mind. I was trying to think of it because there was a circumstance I was thinking of as you were talking, where an owner of a property where there's crime So I'm a landlord, or I'm an owner of property, I rent it out. I know there's crime going on, I want it out of my place. I'm the one making the reports. And I know this will sound like I'm, but if I'm an innocent landlord or owner, so to speak, and I'm calling in reports on my own property, but the responsible person is the tenant, shouldn't those reports be allowed to count towards the nuisance action against that responsible person, the tenant, was my thought. And so, like I said, to just sit here off the cuff and try to think of all of the different circumstances at play or what language might be exactly correct or work better than others, that's hard to do. That was just my thought, because I thought it was a good one. I mean, there's, trying to more focus some of this effort. Anyway, that was my comments.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Further discussion, there's a motion on the table. Comment or questions for staff? Councilmember Boyette.
So after all of that, the bottom line is you prefer it the way it is currently without any additions.
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Very good.
All due
Councilor.
respect to the mayor.
I'm not going to live or die on this one. Councilmember Ripsis, Councilmember Joy.
Mayor, I certainly appreciate your interest here and your orientation of making sure people are protected, innocent people are protected. But I think this is kind of the problem we get into when we try to make policy right here at this table and wordsmith things. I think the staff has presented a strong argument for why. The best language for right now is what was presented. That's not to say that we don't come back and have another update in a year. When we see Tina going after little old ladies who have graffiti on their fence and trying to get their properties taken away because, they haven't gotten them cleaned up fast enough, then I think we might have a concern. But that's certainly not the issue that we have today. And I think an increased aggressiveness in enforcing truly nuisance properties is warranted, and we need to give them all the tools that they have. So I'm going to favor whatever motions we have to go with just the base language as presented by staff. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And Mayor Cole sat on the committee that we created some years ago when we started this nuisance ordinance. And so ordinances evolve, they go through changes, they get more specific, they get clarity. And I'm sure that this one will evolve as we go forward too. I do appreciate staff's work on this. And reading through it, I didn't say that the property owner who complained on Minnesota Avenue also has a motorcycle gang bar across the alleyway. So that as we're talking about innocent property owners, that doesn't make him a guilty property owner, but it's a kind of more of like an area within a neighborhood that's perpetually having these problems. And so even though I understand an individual may say, well, I bought this property and I didn't know this was going to happen. But as I see it happening, we all think that they'd probably be responsible and start to say, hey, wait a minute, we've got to do more than to just watch this happen within this area. So I appreciate that. I supported our nuisance ordinance because I absolutely knew that Ward 3 needed it. And as the dirty dozen that isn't around anymore, but as we identify properties within Ward 3, as we have aging housing stock and we have high tenant occupancy, we see these problems crop up. So I appreciate this nuisance ordinance, and I expect that it will go through many more iterations. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other comments before we proceed to a vote on this proposed amendment? Councilmember Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you for coming up with this language and making this something we can discuss and talk about, because it is important to make sure we're balancing the ordinances that we create and the policy we create. And I liked what Councilmember Owen's suggestion was to change it, but I see your point and how it could actually, again, some of your same things, prolonging the investigation, delaying the process. And yet there is some, like Councilmember Owen said, there is some built-in safety in this. I think that although I did second this item, I don't think I'll support it. But thank you, Bear, for putting it forward. I think that as Councilmember Joy said, and I know Tina will bring changes to us if we find some issues, or if we start hearing from residents, we'll bring that, we can change those things. So again, thank you for this. Thank you for your input on helping us take a look at this. And, but again, I look forward to taking care of a lot of problems within the city with these changes, but thank you.
Good. Let's move on to a vote on this proposed amendment. I'll vote for it. As a matter of principle, I made my point. And I'll be satisfied with that. But I trust staff to use reasonable discretion in how they enforce this, and that's the most important thing. So if in favor of the proposed amendment, this was the one that I proposed, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Nay. There you go. The motion fails miserably. I'm going to not go forward with the other two, obviously. So you now have, again, still the underlying motion before you. Further discussion now on that. Any further discussion on the underlying motion before we proceed to a vote on that? Okay, so the motion before you is to adopt, as recommended by staff, item 3A, the changes to the nuisance ordinance. If in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes item 3A. 3B, is there a motion before us on 3B? Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the first reading ordinance amending Billings, Montana City Code, Section 18-1100, graffiti as recommended by staff.
Councilmember Neese makes the second. Discussion. Either of you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I'm sorry, because graffiti is one of my hot topics. And so again, Tina, thank you for you and your crew and your team that does this. I guess I would, as what Councilmember Kennedy brought up about the graffiti, of some other way to look at it. I know you and I have talked about that. There's a graffiti trailer the city has that has been work. Can you just speak to that particular trailer, how it can be used? I think volunteers can use it, things like that. Can you kind of talk to how that can be used so the public can actually maybe help others that need help?
The public can use it, but it probably would be in partnership with us. We just want to make sure that it's maintained properly and used properly and no damage, that sort of thing. We would certainly go and help them with whatever project. That's kind of what we do. If we have a situation that's identified in town, many times we get volunteers to help as well. So I'm not in a position to have the funding to abate graffiti citywide, but I do what I can with donations, with donated paint, reduced paint, with the trailer, with volunteer partnerships to help those private property owners that may be behind the eight ball, and we can help them a little bit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Anything else before we proceed to a vote on 3B? Okay, we'll move to a vote. The motion is for approval of item 3B, the proposed changes to graffiti ordinance. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. That motion passes unanimously. Boarded up structures, 3C. Is there a motion? Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve the first reading ordinance amending Billings, Montana City Code, Section 18-1400, boarded up structures as recommended by staff.
Second.
And also with Tina's understanding that we're going to move ahead.
Right, and I wanted to clarify this also for Gina, is that you decided that we are not grandfathering. That once this goes into effect, that those existing structures that are boarded and have been for a long time, cases can be opened on them. That's what I'm hearing from council. Okay.
Once we get a second, we'll come back to try to look at the
Second.
exact language and make sure we're comfortable there. Councilmember Neese, you wanted to indicate a second? Okay. I don't know whether Gina or anybody's had a chance to look at the exact language that talks about that grandfathering concept. I think we understand what the goal is, but is the language clear? Because we are adopting written law here, not broad concepts. So we actually have to have actual language. Councilmember Rupsis?
Mayor, I didn't actually see any indication in here of grandfathering or not. There's no language involved in the ordinance that says one way or the other. So I think it's just staff's direction that we're providing here.
Okay, sort of a policy, how they plan to enforce it. Does anybody have any other thoughts on that issue in particular? Councilmember Neese?
I agree. I think that's the enforcement starting, once it's approved, then they're going to decide to have 180 days from the approval date. I know the language does say structure may, let's see, okay, 180 days total from initial installation. You know, we don't know when those installations were and ones that were done, so it is 180 days. I'm assuming we're changing that a little bit because if you go out there, you know, it's probably been there for several months.
Councilmember Neese, can you tell us what section or page you're
Yeah,
at?
section 18403, section A, third line down. So if that's a problem, you know, we can address it or not. I think going forward, if it's suddenly installed, then it's 180 days. But I don't think it addresses the grandfathering issue one way or the other.
Yeah, I think, I would be concerned because the plain letter of that, window or door openings on a structure may be boarded up for no more than 180 days, total days from the initial installation. And if the facts are it went up 2 years ago, obviously they are in violation from day one, when I think the idea is to give them an additional 180 days. So shouldn't it say something like 180 total days from initial installation or the effective date of this ordinance, whichever is later?
I think that would work perfectly.
Yeah.
Do you want to make amendment to that?
Yeah, let's.
You said it and wrote it, and you make the amendment.
Okay. I appreciate it. Yeah, we should do a friendly amendment, which are so helpful. But all right, so that's the idea, is just to change, add those words at the end of 1403A, to add the words, or the effective date of this ordinance.
Whichever is later.
Whichever is later.
Yep, I can add
And giving
that for-
staff a little bit of authorization to fiddle with the words if needed.
Sure, I can add
I'll
that.
second that.
And just to be clear, that's in both A and B. They both
excellent.
reference 180 days.
All right, appreciate that, in A and B. So I made the motion, somebody seconded it.
Second.
Councilmember Neese, so let's vote. I assume there's no discussion on that. If in favor of that amendment to the underlying motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Okay, so that more specifically addresses the grandfathering issue. The underlying motion has now been amended with that clarification. Further discussion now on the underlying motion. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Brown.
Mayor, I just had a question that I probably should have asked earlier, but it slipped my mind. I know there have been requests and some sort of discussion kind of on the fringes, and I know this makes people uncomfortable to talk about this right here, but where are we on learning more about how this particular ordinance and its changes intersect with eminent domain authority? Oh, everyone averted their eyes and.
Went straight to him.
Significant progress has not been made,
Okay, that's a fair update.
but shall be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion before we proceed to a vote? Okay, we have before us a motion for approval with a slight modification to clarify grandfathering on 3C. If in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes item 3. Tony, would you read item 4?
Item 4, Cottonwood Park Master Plan.
No, this will be the
I'm
graffiti
sorry.
resolution.
Oh, I was so excited.
Already got a foot out the door.
Item 4, Resolution 2, resolution establishing a graffiti fund as recommended by staff.
Back to Tina. I think we have a pretty good idea what this is, but Tina, remind us.
Yeah, I doubt that we're going to have a lot of money to fund this, but I would like the council to consider adding this in as a resolution. The anti-graffiti funds section in the ordinance had been there since the ordinance was written. We just didn't have a resolution on file to attach to it. We did the research and it just wasn't there. I do feel that if we're going to get ahead of or even keep up with the graffiti that's going on in this city, we have to encourage people to report. And my primary goal in this fund is to have a reward system, because people are not going to do it just out of the kindness of their heart and tell me, you know, who might be doing this. I just feel that a reward system would be of benefit to the city. It would encourage people to be more involved and care a little bit more about what's going on.
Okay, very good. Questions or comments, Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Boyette? Or motions, however you want to proceed.
Okay, I will recommend, I move to approve a resolution establishing a graffiti fund as recommended by staff.
Thank you very much. Second, Councilmember Owen. Either like you just speak to your motion. If not, Councilmember Boyette. Councilmember Boyette?
Councilmember Boyd, I just have a question, so please, Councilmember Boyd, go ahead.
So many years ago, I ran the Crime Stoppers program from the city police department here. And there was this reward system, and you wouldn't believe what had happened. We put up a sign at Christmas that said, "Want Christmas money, rat out your friend," and we made a lot of arrests that way. So this is a good program. If it's used, people will pay to rat out their friends.
He also has a Scrooge costume that he keeps in his, that brings out every Christmas. Okay, Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you. Tina, or even Chris, if you want, do you have a sense of how much needs to go in here to make this worthwhile to get started? I mean, I assume over time we can drop some fines and fees in there, but what would we need to start at? Do you plan to include it in your budget request this year? Have we thought about any of those sort of mechanics of launching this Scrooge initiative?
I do not have a dollar amount. I'm assuming I would have to discuss that with someone that writes the checks. What was the second part of your question?
I'm just wondering if you have a sense of how many people we're likely to see. I mean, are we talking dozens, hundreds?
I don't know. This is, again, one of those things where I'm going to have to see how it plays out for a little while before I can make that decision. I think that there can be some money found to start it at least. What that number amount is, we'll probably have to discuss with Andy and that sort of thing. It is not currently in my fiscal year 25 ask because I needed to get this approved first. So I do believe, though, that there are some taggers out there that are all over the city that if we did have a reward system, that we might be able to figure out who this person is, hold them accountable, get those fines put back into our fund, because police department has assured me that they will be citing under the graffiti ordinance and not criminal mischief, which is a state code. So if they cite under the ordinance, the monies come back to the city for their fines. Plus, their community service, they get assigned to me, and they get to fix what they broke.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. Tina, this amount, and again, you don't know how much you're going to need, but if someone wanted, or an organization or business wanted to donate to this fund, they could fund that fully.
Yes.
5,000, 10,000, something like that, that would probably fund it for some time, I would assume. Because once you catch them, you're getting those fines to replenish, something like that.
Right, yes, and I have spoken to some organizations already that have shown interest in contributing to that fund. I just need to establish it.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's one of the reasons I want to support this, is because I think once it's out there, now Tina can go out there and solicit some of those funds so it doesn't come out of the general fund budget. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Other comments? I'll just comment more generally. A couple years ago, I looked into what we do when it comes to rewards, not on graffiti specifically, but on catching criminals generally. And we don't have a rewards program. And we have a very informal system through Crime Stoppers. The budget is very, very low. It's typically, the police department has some money for buying informants at a very small level. You're talking a few $1,000s a year. I think that what's true for graffiti is true for other criminal activity as well. And so, and I do think it would be very appealing for donors to contribute to. And so I encourage us and the police department and whoever in administration could help organize the administration of a reward program like that and developing some policies, because it's the sort of thing that would require some structure to come back to the larger issue of rewards and establish a fund each year that says has $20,000 to $30,000 call as a way to help promote tips. So very good. Thank you. Anything else before we vote on the motion on item 4? Seeing none, the motion is for approval of the resolution as drafted. If in favor, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 5. Tony, would you read item number 5?
Item number 5, Cottonwood Park Master Plan. Staff recommends approval.
Superintendent Mike Pigg is our man. Mike, it's all yours.
Thank you. So we, Park Board recommended approval of the the master plan, and so I have Michael Versman here from Land Design to present the overview of it, and we'll have it up here, and then we'll answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
He gets time on.
Chris's skills have really grown with the computer, haven't they? When I first came here.
Michael, welcome.
Hey.
If you would, introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Michael Versman. I'm a landscape architect, consultant for the Parks Department with Land Design, based here in Billings. So we were responsible for helping to usher through the park master planning process for Cottonwood Park. So if we jump in, just to give everybody a sense for community context, where Cottonwood Park falls within the city as a whole, and then also as it compares to some of the other community parks, which is also what Cottonwood Park classifies as within the overall park system. You can see it's out here, farthest west community park that we have in the city. Currently undeveloped, but right on the fringe of future housing and other development. If we go in a layer. Oops. Yeah, that was a little too far. That's all right. Okay, so just again, zooming in a little bit so you can see Cottonwood Park. So it's a 38-acre parcel, undeveloped land at this point. Adjacent streets are Rimrock Road to the north, Grand Avenue to the south. And then you have 54th Street, which actually forms the eastern boundary of the park parcel itself. In addition, High Ditch also runs across the site. It divides the north from the south by about like a quarter or so of the overall acreage is falls to the north of the ditch versus the south. And then if we go advance, and then one more, I believe. There we go. Okay, so brief history. So the property was donated, I believe, first to the county and then eventually came into the city ownership. It was dedicated in 2002 by the Forbes family. As a part of their dedication, when it came to the city, they also wrote in requirements and vision for elements and things that they would like to see happen with the park parcel itself. One of these was their vision statement for just a nice general purpose use community park. If we go to the next slide then. There were specific requirements for things that they did want to see included into the park master plan, as well as a few key restrictions. I think the most interesting was the restriction of a sports complex. So keeping things, again, more general use rather than a real focused development. Next. Okay, so public process timeline. So just to briefly recap, so we began the process with a public survey, so a statistically valid survey that went out to a representative sample of the entire community. With that survey, we developed a list of amenities that were appropriate within the bounds that were already established by the Forbes family. With that list, then we took and developed a series of plan concepts, which were then presented to the public at a series of subsequent meetings. So reaching out to get community feedback specifically, and then refining our plans based on the items or based on the things that we were being told, the feedback that we were getting. Again, went through park board informative presentations, and then finally a park board adoption or recommendation on our last park board meeting. One other thing that I should mention that doesn't show specifically on the timeline is I was actually able to meet with members of the Forbes family as a part of the development of this master plan, really to get a sense from them for what value the Forbes has placed on this property, to get some more insight into the restrictions and requirements that they had placed on the dedication, and then also to get a sense for what they would think would be appropriate to include as a memorial, basically for their generosity to our community. So what you can see up on the screen now is the final master plan. Just to kind of touch on some brief highlights. So the park is organized, again, you can see High Ditch running across the north, that north quarter of the site, and then 54th Street running on the east side. There is Colton Boulevard on the south. It currently dead ends on the west side of the site. The park development itself is organized around a central hub of activity. You'll have seen on one of the wishes from the Forbes family was a large community shelter. So that actually kind of makes the real nexus of the activity for the site, and everything else kind of organizes around that. Then adjacent to that large community shelter, we have the large community playground, which also includes some exercise equipment, and one of the things that came out that was kind of interesting was a parkour course, so like Ninja Warrior type stuff. So we have some of those elements included in there as well. So activity for multi generations. Again, then moving to the east, you can see the community center building and splash pad. The community center, we're figuring about 24,000-ish square feet. That's derived mainly from studies that have been done previously within the other park master plans. I think the desire is to sort of have a standardized footprint that we'll start to incorporate into all of the community parks. So that gets you a couple of basketball courts and then some locker room, classroom facilities as well. Then on the west side of the site, you can see we did include a measure of pickleball courts, tennis courts, basketball courts as well for active recreation, and included a 3-acre dog park on the south side of the park. The high ditch being where it is does create a physical barrier. We have bridged it in a few select locations, but it also created a nice opportunity to provide that memorial space for the Forbes family. So one of the things that came out in my discussions with them was really the value that they placed on the natural landscape and just nature in general. So with that in mind, we've dedicated the north half of the property as a natural area, creating a community pond and then a nice shelter for the family. Yeah. So costs. So again, at this level, we're trying to project costs out into the future. Implementation and schedules are always a little bit unknown. So what we presented is a range of costs on how we see construction. Kind of if we said everything's in go day one versus kind of extending it out. So what you see then on the screen, so the pie chart breaks this down. So the total cost of the park development all in, we're looking at that range of $25 million to $30 million. Within that, then you can see just a rough percentage breakdown between each of the separate segments of work that would go into the development of the park itself. Generally at this scale, we try not to get too much into the parts and pieces of it itself, like delving into the numbers, but we do develop this based on kind of the magnitude of what we see on the plan. So just briefly, since we kept everybody here, I'll give you a little bit of a overview. So we prepared a 3D rendering just to give you a sense again for the space and what it would look like. I apologize, that's glitching a little bit. So you can see again, so sport courts organized around some ancillary shelters to provide spaces for staging and camaraderie before or after matches. You can see zooming in the splash pad, a rough conception of a community center building, playground area. Then you can see the higher activity outdoor exercise areas and parkour equipment. Then this is the Forbes Memorial Pond and Shelter. So having the ditch nearby creates an advantageous arrangement with trying to construct that feature. Again, the dog park. Pump track, so that was one I didn't mention specifically, but that is also provided around that community shelter area as well. That's it.
Cool technology, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, is that it, Michael?
That's it.
Okay, so questions, there's an opportunity for approval, or that's the question here. Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Gielich, Nice?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think that previously there had been issues with drainage off of Cottonwood Park. So could you kind of address the soil profile and some of the challenges in developing this park? Thank you.
Yes, no, so we did receive that feedback from the neighbors to the south as a part of the process. One of the things that we did is we included and we preserved and enhanced the berms that are already there to protect their drainage. So that was something that we heard loud and clear that we are preserving and enhancing in the master plan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Gielich?
Do you see on-street parking on 54th and Colton so that people can park and access the park from the street?
Sure. Yes, on Colton, yes. On 54th, we do not.
Is that, who's driving that policy in terms of parking on 54th?
So I believe that's, what is that classified as? A principal arterial or just arterial. So I'm not 100% up on the code. I don't think that would be allowed or very easily accomplished. I might be mistaken, but but then there's also a physical barrier of a drainage ditch right now that runs on that side. That's so that's part of the other reason.
Okay. As a general, I mean, the physical, the ditch there could be problematic. I think in general, it's preferable to have parking along our parks. It slows down traffic in the area around it. It means that it gives a nice barrier for people playing in the area. But it also means that we don't need to dedicate as much parking to a parking lot in the middle of the park as well, so we don't have as much, there's lower costs, but there's also more land that can remain useful for parks. I think we did, for playing space and whatnot. I think we did a really good job with Optimist Park in our last couple of years ago when we reoriented where we had parking and took it out of the middle of the park and put it into and extended the street there. I think that was a really excellent piece of unusual, I think, for a city council to really be able to. You don't necessarily want to have designing this kind of stuff, but we did a really good job, I think, with that. And so I think as a general rule with our parks, community parks, we should be encouraging parking along the perimeter. So thank you.
Very good, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Got a couple of questions. One, and maybe you can give me a little history on the Forbes dedication. You know, a lot of times we get parkland dedicated because of it's coming into the city for requirements. So was any of this amount of land required, or would have been required by whatever they may have been developed, or did they just decided to just carve out some land and donate it to the city? Do we know?
I don't.
So we don't, okay.
I don't know.
We do know it. I can comment on that if you'd like me to.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, and then I've got another question about the plan.
This was out of the goodness of the Forbes heart. They developed no property around there. They own no other property around there. It was pure gift in the expectations the city would then develop this kind of general park.
Okay, thank you. And on the master plan, we've talked about, Mike, this is really to you, I suppose. When we did the Castle Rock master plan, and I was assuming we'd see it in other master plans, and maybe I shouldn't do that. And we talk about not just the cost of building, the estimated cost of building, but the estimated cost to operate and maintain it and replace future things. So did this master plan cover any of the cost for FTEs? Because I know you can't necessarily look at the current wages and stuff because it's going to change by the time it's built, but they did build into what the cost it would cost to, when you put in this particular amenity, it's going to be this many FTEs to have to maintain it and operate it and things like that, as well as, once these are put in, what the estimated replacement costs, what you'd have to put aside to make sure that these things don't deteriorate and then have to be pulled out and then never replaced. Was any of that done within this master plan?
So, did you cover maintenance expenses?
Yeah, we do have some language in there related to that and providing estimates. I think again, projecting into the future, I think that is something that we will need to coordinate on still and kind of make sure that we have those numbers dialed in to the best we can project.
Right, okay. And Mayor, one last question. Now, this is the only copy that I'm seeing as far as the master plan. Was the master plan sent out to us at all? Because I haven't seen the actual, or was this the master plan? Because I haven't seen the Castle Rock master plan was 40-some pages long and lots of detail. This looks more like a presentation of the master plan. Is there?
So this is like the presentation that Michael's bringing. It's not the actual master plan itself, no.
Okay, when will we get the master plan?
Yeah, there is a document. It is 90% there.
Okay, so it's not done. Okay.
I think like I said, I think we need to talk a little bit about kind of getting some of that stuff dialed in, and then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Tisdale, I recognize Councilmember Kennedy before. Councilmember Kennedy, Tisdale, Boyette.
Mayor, I sit right next to you and you always forget me.
Yeah.
The question I have is safety. I didn't see in any of your pictures any type of lighting or anything in that area, and that's one thing Mr. Pig is looking at all throughout the parks. Are you going to put something in, or are we going to wait until it'll be a developed park and then we'll have to go back and do something?
So this is really just a guiding document to guide the design. So in the design phase, we would pull back in those elements of lighting in the parking lot, lighting along the trails. So this is just maybe your overall concept of design.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Tiswell?
First and foremost, I understand it's just a master plan that we're looking at. It's just going to be added to a long list of unfinished park business. We're going to be discussing this over the next 30 years about an unfinished park. I don't think that there's an area within our community with less need of an $8 million investment into a community center than this park. This thing's bloated. It lacks any kind of detail and possible timeline. There's no detail to it. I won't support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, if this is the plan is approved tonight, are you planning on bringing this back? Is it like a CIP at some point?
No, mainly the reason for this, well, it was kind of driven by the bond. We didn't have any master plan, so we had to driven that brought it forward to the forefront. And there was also already funding in the budget for the master plan. Part of the thought of it is, though, this opens the door now as people donate money, we can start donating it towards, this cause of the master plan, or if there's another funding source like grant funding becomes available. Now we have the pathway to go forward with that without having to then go back, create the master plan, and then move forward into design, so.
Just follow it, Mayor. So then you're not expecting any funds from the council at this point? You're just looking for the approval of the plan?
Correct. I'm just looking for approval of the plan, zero funding request.
Thank you, Council Member Aspenleiter.
So just to move the process along, I'll make a motion to approve the Cottonwood Park Master Plan, and I'd like to discuss it.
Very good. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Ripsis. Did either of you want to speak to what's now a formal motion?
Yes, please.
Please, go ahead.
So I made the motion to get the formal discussion going and the process going. I've got some functional concerns, I guess, in that you're asking us to approve a master plan that you haven't presented to us. We haven't seen the document. And you're saying that it's 90% complete, but you still got to figure out the operational maintenance costs and those types of things that haven't been presented to us, but you want us to approve it tonight and then go change the document that we haven't seen and then have that be okay. And from a process perspective, I'm not okay with that. So I made the motion to get this moving, but I'm going to vote against it because from a process standpoint, it doesn't feel like we've been.
I guess there's an issue about whether you can speak against your motion. Yeah, proceed as a. You can vote against it. Yeah, but you can't argue against it.
So I'm in favor of the park, but procedurally, this is jacked up, in my opinion.
Okay, we'll call that good. We got the point. Other discussion? There's no, okay, Councilor Ripsis, Shaw, Boyette, or Nice.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I am going to support it tonight. I do have the same concern, though, that we should have had that document. That being said, we all know we're not building this park anytime soon. There's no funds, there's no visibility to any funds to do it, with the exception of we have $400,000 to $500,000 in cash in lieu already accounted for this park. And the Partners for Parks Foundation has donations already in the $45,000 to $50,000 range. So we have some amount, but as compared to the $25 to $30 million, I mean, we're not even going to build, the dog park for that, given all the site work that has to be done there. So to me, not having that complete document in front of us doesn't kill the deal, right? This is it's a good plan for this park. We did all the good community engagement that we needed to do. I would have preferred to have that document with us tonight. I've never seen this before where we went to the Parks Board, didn't have that document, they made a recommendation, and then 5 or 6 months later, it comes to council. So the whole thing has been kind of wonky, but we had some other stuff going in there too around that November timeframe. So I'd like to encourage you to make sure as future plans come forward, we've got all those things kind of in a row before it gets to council. But It's disappointing that we don't have any, even the small amount of funds that we were looking to get dedicated through the bond here. We could have done something, but it's going to be a long time going before we even move any dirt out here, which it's fairly disappointing. This area of town is growing faster than any other area in town, and we don't have a park. I think the diagram at the beginning where you showed the context of this park, for context that where it is and how far it is from any other similar facilities on that end of town. It's much needed. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmembers Shaw, Neese, Boyett, and Tidswell.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I will support this. I agree, I would like to see the full document, but it's not a deal breaker to me that we don't have the operations and maintenance costs and other things yet, because this park is just so far down the list that by the time we're actually going to be funding it, these numbers are going to be completely out of date, in my opinion. Though, just for a little background, the way the Parks Bond came together is we looked at all of the unfulfilled master plans that the city has adopted over decades and tried to put together a package that would make some headway on them. And Cottonwood Park was on the list, but just a little bit at the bottom. I don't see that significantly changing. As much as I agree, I would love to see parks everywhere in the city, and this seems like it would be a really nice one, but in my opinion, those numbers are going to be completely out of date by the time we're actually funding this, and we're all going to be gone. Alas. Sorry, Forbes family.
Thank you. And you're the youngest one here, so that's really frightening, but I fear
Today's
it's
actually
true.
my birthday, which I didn't,
Councilmember Neese.
Mayor, I think if you could recognize Councilmember Boyett first and then come back to me, please.
Sure, absolutely, Councilmember Boyett.
Well, to satisfy everything, I thought we'd make a substitute motion that we table this until we see the whole master plan to bring it back to us for a vote, because then that would solve a lot of the issues. At least we would have the plan.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you very much. You've, I think, commented, but I would like to have Mike comment on whether there's a problem with delay on this and why it is kind of coming forward with the picture, but not with all the other details.
Yeah, it's my error. I should have hooked it on there, and I should have worked a little closer with Michael. There is no time-sensitive material here, so I have no problem being a delay, and we'll bring forward the full package, yes.
Okay, that sounds kind of appealing. Chris, you want to comment?
Yeah, I actually think, I would encourage you to support this, this substitute motion. You should have the document. I don't want you approving a document that you've not seen. Mike and I talked about it. We can get that fixed. There's not a time sensitivity, as he said. A couple things, so two questions. One would be, if you've seen it enough in the presentation that we put it on consent, or do you want a presentation of it? And then secondly, I would encourage you to think about it, frankly, the neighboring properties. Imagine Pioneer Park, North Park, South Park, any regional park that everybody, all the neighborhoods around it backed up to the park and/or had no eyes on the street, eyes on the park, as well as parking on the street. I think it's important whether this park, hopefully it is within decades, not half centuries or longer that it gets built, but I bet we would all probably be quite shocked if we don't see subdivisions all around it coming to us as early as next week, next year, or shortly thereafter. And I would hope roads would border all four sides of this, and that the orientation of the residential development would face the park so that it improves safety, it improves all things relative to what we're trying to do, ultimately quality design. So just please, even if it's not the park that gets to be developed first, it really is critically important how the land use develops around it. And none of us would want Pioneer Park with everybody backing up to it, or South Park or North Park. So,
Chris, if I can just ask a question on your point there. I support Councilmember Boyett's motion. I think it's a good idea to take a pause. But during that time period, could staff give us at least some basic understanding of the layout of the Wells property to the north and what that means for connection. I know there's one pedestrian connection, but also to the extent we've had any preliminary discussions with property owners to the west, and also, even if we haven't, staff's position on putting a road there that would provide parking, provide easy access, exactly what you were just talking about during this time period.
Sure.
We're not looking for some detailed analysis that delays things, costs a lot of money, but something basic.
We won't do specific added work, but we will look into what exists and what's the development pattern of what we know, either with our transportation plans or, the growth policy and development on the private property around it.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a motion, substitute motion before us. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. I'll speak to the motion because I would have made it if Mike didn't, but I kind of figured he was going to. So, the discussion tonight has been around, a presentation and not an actual document. And I would have appreciated the staff pulling this from the agenda because it doesn't give us a document to approve. We're asking to approve an IOU type situation. Just through the presentation alone, we've heard comments of how, maybe it may be bloated. There's memorials in here. There's no lighting discussion in here. There's street parking issues. There's a lot of different things, drainage that came up. And I have a lot of questions about some of that. And so for this to come to us, I'm glad that we're going to be postponing it because there's a lot of things that we need to do to look at this and have the full details of the plans so that we can actually read through it and then come not with knowledge to say, yeah, we like this or don't like this, or, we need to make sure that the land development around it, there should be some comments in there about the land development around that is what we expect that to do. So then planning and transportation looks at this plan and say, hey, we need to make sure we plan the streets around this the way this plan is going to. So there's a lot of things that I think is missing out of this document that I hope that when we see it again has that in there so we can have a good conversation about what we're seeing, the public can see what we're actually approving, and then move that forward. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would just suggest that it not be on the consent agenda because of all those issues. Councilmember Tisdale, you'd raised your hand before. Now the motion's changed a little bit, but I want to give it back to you in case you wanted to comment.
I have to, Tom. We do have Yellowstone Family Park, about 1,000 yards from that, up the hill. You can laugh all you want, but I pay $150 a year, and so do my neighbors for that. And what we get for that is an old park that gets its grass cut, and that's all that's done. I haven't had one review from one visitor at my house that went to the park that loved that park. So we're going to put $8 million into a 23,000 square foot community center, but we're not going to do anything to an antiquated neighborhood park up the street. That doesn't seem city-like, does it?
Yeah, just address your comments to me. Or,
yeah, right at you, Mayor. You can take them right at you. I mean, we were gently coerced into that 20 years ago.
The neighborhood did vote to approve it, if that's coercion.
Well, we voted to approve it versus 50 condo units in that area. So I mean, that was the basis of the vote. We could have 50 condo units. We could have a neighborhood park. Where would you go, sir?
Yeah, that's not my recollection, and
That's mine. I live there.
I know you do now, but I don't think you did then.
I did then.
Did you?
Yes, sir.
I didn't know. I've learned something. I appreciate
bless you.
that. Okay. Not my recollection exactly, but there's some truth to it, for sure. Okay, further discussion on the motion, which is the substitute motion to table this until a later date to be determined by staff, right? So, any other thing before we vote?
I'll call the question.
But you don't. We're going to vote anyway. So we don't have to have a second vote about whether to vote. So, if in favor of the motion, if the motion is clear, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. If opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay, so motion passes. Councilmember Joy voting in the opposition. We'll kick it back to staff, and we'll see when you come back later on that. That concludes item 5. And is there any public comment on anything not on our agenda? There's nobody at the public to comment, so I think not. Council initiatives. Then, everybody, we are adjourned. Thank you.